with us this evening. Zach, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for
All
having
right,
me,
it is a big night, of course. It is a big night here all across the country. Races in 6 different states. Some that the president himself is watching very closely. I thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Berman. I send it up to New York, and Elizabeth takes it from here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. It is election night across America. Any moment now, we are expecting President Trump to speak at a congressional picnic on the White House South Lawn, as polls have just closed in Kentucky and Georgia, 2 of the half-dozen states holding high-stakes primaries tonight. Some of these races are about more than just the candidates. They're the test of the man who endorsed them, and that would be President Trump. Right now, that loyalty test is playing out in northern Kentucky with the most expensive House primary in history. That is where Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, a frequent Trump critic, is fighting to keep his job. Trump, tired of the thorn in his side, is backing Ed Galrine, a retired Navy SEAL the president said he even personally recruited to take Massie down, who, by the way, he calls the worst congressman in the history of our country.
Thomas Massie's a terrible congressman. He's been a terrible congressman from day one. Dealing with him is just horrible. I don't think he's a Republican. I think he's actually a Democrat. He's not a libertarian. You know, sometimes they say he's really a Democrat. He votes against us all the time.
Now, if Trump succeeds, Massie will join a growing list of lawmakers ousted by the president. And perhaps feeling emboldened, Trump today made an endorsement in Texas that could be the toughest test yet of his strength. And it's already infuriating several members of the Republican Party. Trump is backing Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, a man who has been both impeached and indicted on felony fraud charges. He's endorsing this man, Ken Paxton, over the longtime incumbent Senator John Cornyn. Cornyn's former Senate colleague, Vice President J.D. Vance, defended the endorsement as the right move for the country.
I've known John Cornyn for a long time, but unfortunately, you know, when it really counted, Ken Paxton was there for the country, was there for the president, and that's why he ultimately earned the president's endorsement. He thinks he's going to be a better senator.
All right, we have a jam-packed hour of news to get to, so let's get started with NewsNation's Brooke Schaefer, live in Hebron, Kentucky, with the Massie campaign. Brooke, what is the mood as the votes come in? Right now, it's the early voting that they're tallying up, and right now, it's looking like Massie might be trailing.
Well, even still, as you know, we're starting to see some of these votes trickle in. I just talked to the Massie camp, Elizabeth, and they say they are still feeling confident, they are excited, and they say they are still feeling the momentum swing. They said that they had been looking at some of these early numbers, and they felt like the early numbers were on their side. They felt like some of these recent attack ads against Massie were really helping them and working in their favor. But the admitted concern, they told me not too long ago, is President Trump's criticism of Congressman Massie. I was outside of a polling location in Kentucky for the afternoon today, and I talked to several Republican voters, Elizabeth, who told me that President Trump's negative opinion of Massie influenced their vote today. I even talked to a few voters who said they voted for Massie before, but this time they told me, at least one guy said, quote, "It's time to go with Trump." And a Massie surrogate told me not too long ago that that is a concern. He said it's always a concern when you go up against the president. Even still, they are feeling confident, and they are really trying to hammer home that Congressman Massie is still a conservative. He is still a Trump supporter who votes with the president 9 times out of 10. They feel like he is going to be the one to pull this off again tonight. Still, they think this will be close. They said they believe this will come down to a handful of votes. And I do want to mention this. I spoke to a surrogate who said he spoke with the congressman just earlier tonight, who said that if he loses, he thinks he did this in the right way. He has no regrets, saying the congressman said he did not bend the knee. Elizabeth?
All right, Brooke Schaefer, it's going to be quite a night there in Kentucky. Thank you so much. Let's get analysis now from our panel. Chris Hahn is a News Nation political contributor and the host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. And Batya Ungar-Sargon is the host of Batya right here on News Nation. Great to have both of you with us. Batya, I'm going to start with you and this really stunning news of President Trump's endorsement of Ken Paxton in the Texas Senate race. As we just, said in the lead-in, many of the Senate Republicans are livid over this decision. He waited a long time. What do you make of it?
I think there were three things that went into this. The first is that the grassroots really wanted Paxton over Cornyn. Cornyn was seen as a rhino, part of the old pre-Trump Republican Party, and he wasn't able to get the Save America Act passed, which is very important to the grassroots. I think also President Trump probably noticed that Paxton was ahead in the polls, and Trump likes to win. He likes to be seen as backing the winning candidate and causing that win, but I think he also probably would have joined a winning ticket over a losing one. Although I don't think it was very acrimonious, you can see how long he waited to endorse. And the third thing I think behind this was he wanted to show strength and confidence. Paxton was seen as the candidate less likely to win than Cornyn against Tallarico in Texas. And I think the safe bet would have been Cornyn, and this shows that Trump actually feels confident that,
I think it also had something to do with the fact that Paxton was the first in line when it came to Trump alleging that the 2020 election was fraudulent. Paxton was there, filed a lawsuit.
Made Trump very happy.
History there. Chris, Thomas Massie, we just heard from Brooke Schaefer at the Thomas Massie sort of campaign party tonight. They're hoping it'll be a party. Thomas Massie is another test. He faces his toughest primary of his entire career, facing off against this Trump-picked opponent. Even Defense Secretary Hegseth was campaigning for Massie's opponent, and Massie's been a huge thorn in Trump's side. Even though he votes with Trump most of the time, Massie's the one who led the fight to release the Epstein files. Trump is not going to forget that.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is the thing that always gets me here. Massie's with Trump almost all the time. He says, you know what? We want a little justice for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and Trump is no longer on his side, and he's pulling out all the stops. It's the most expensive primary for a House race in the history of the House of Representatives.
Wow.
Because Trump didn't want Massie to allow the Epstein files to come to light. Maybe he voted against them 2 or 3 other times. You know what? I would not want to be a Republican in America today if I had any inkling of opposing the president and doing my job to provide a proper check and balance on him, because it's clear Trump will go after them, and Trump's track record of when he goes after them is pretty successful, right? So it is very likely that Massie will fall tonight because the Republican Party, like the old rules of politics don't matter. Massie goes home every weekend. He works with the Boy Scouts. He's helping old ladies get their Social Security check. He's helping his constituents get their passports. That stuff used to matter in politics. It doesn't in the Republican Party anymore. They're going to do what Trump tells them to do. That's life.
Yeah. Quickly, he makes a point there that loyalty seems to be preeminent.
The fact that Chris really wanted Thomas Massie to win is the reason the Republicans want him to lose. The left loves him because, as Donald Trump said, he is a Democrat. He's a leftist. He's an anti-Zionist. He's obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein. These are not things that the base actually likes. And, he wants it both ways. By the way, he didn't vote with Trump most of the time. 72% of the time is not most of the time. That's pretty low. That's actually incorrect. I also spoke to a woman who once voted for Thomas Massie, and this time did not vote for Thomas Massie because she says she sent him to Washington to vote with the president.
All right.
Batya, it's Trump's party, and that's a big problem for the Republicans in November. It's going to be a problem for them in Texas as well.
We will see.
Because if he only gets 20% of Latinos in Texas, they ain't winning Texas either.
Well, we'll see, because this will shape up to be quite a race in Texas. I mean, it's an unbelievable race. Batya, I want to ask you about this fund that has been set up. After President Trump sued the IRS because a subcontractor who worked for the IRS leaked his tax returns in his first term. He sued the IRS. They've dropped the lawsuit and reached a settlement where they are going to take $1.8 billion, with a B, taxpayer dollars, and establish this fund for anybody who feels they've been wrongly persecuted or prosecuted by the Department of Justice at any time, they say. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche faced some really tough questions on Capitol Hill today about this fund. And specifically, Democrats are calling it a slush fund that Trump can use to pay anybody he wants with no oversight. Even Senate Republican leader John Thune said he doesn't like this.
I think it's indefensible. I don't understand who thought this was a good idea. I do, actually. It's Todd Blanche who's, auditioning for this job, throwing all the spaghetti at the wall.
You think this fund was his idea?
Yeah, I mean, Trump said he hadn't been involved in it. I don't.
Hold on, Chris.
Yeah, I don't need anybody to believe that. Maybe he asked him, maybe he didn't. I just think this is insanely stupid. It just plays into all of the Democrats' worst accusations about the Trump administration. It looks really corrupt. Americans are hurting, and now you're taking their taxpayer dollars and giving it to people who beat up cops on camera? No, I'm totally against this. I just think it's horrible, and it's just such a mistake at a time when Trump needs to be consolidating power and convincing the American people what I believe is true, which is that he wants them to succeed. He wants what's best for them. This is just such a mistake in my view.
He should say that.
To Chris, to Batya's point, Vice President Vance was doing the press briefing at the White House today, filling in for Caroline Leavitt while she's on maternity leave, and he did refuse to rule out that people convicted of assaulting police officers on January 6th could get payouts from this fund. That was notable because some of these people are on camera doing this, and President Trump was endorsed by many police unions when he ran.
Yeah. You guys watch the show Paradise? There's a Paradise-size wave coming in November because of moves like this. I agree with Batya completely. And the reason why the vice president didn't rule it out is because the president didn't give him permission to rule it out. And if the president really cares about working class Americans and voters, he would say it. He says he doesn't. He doesn't think about their financial situation. It's going to be in every ad, everywhere in this country in November, and there are going to be people on the ballot who are just names who are going to get elected and beat incumbent Republicans, maybe even in the United States Senate. Because this is the kind of stuff that the American people will not stomach. You're going to give away money to people who beat up cops? You're going to give away money? You're going to give Steve Bannon money?
We don't know for sure that that's going to happen.
Trump supporters for building the wall?
Okay, just fact check. We don't know who's going to get the money yet, but there is no oversight on who is going to get the money, and it's unclear. But we should say that hasn't yet been decided. And Trump saying he doesn't care about, he's not thinking about people's economic condition. He said that when he was talking about negotiating with Iran, that what he's thinking about with Iran is nuclear weapons. But Batya, I do want to ask you, because there was also this very quietly released posting from the DOJ today that as part of this settlement, President Trump, his family, and his business will no longer be audited by the IRS. There is a current audit of President Trump underway right now of his business that could have cost the Trump family business as much as $100 million in penalties. That apparently, according to what this posting is, will be dropped.
Terrible, indefensible, ridiculous, the caricature of the right that the left hurls at them, just as Chris says. This is going to be in every ad, and I just do not understand why they're doing it. It just paints the picture that he is above the law in the name of ending weaponization of the justice system. It makes absolutely no sense, and I'm disgusted by it, frankly.
10 seconds, Chris.
I agree with Batya.
Okay.
Right? I agree with her about Todd Blanche as well. He's trying to kiss up to the president. I mean, she's right on this. It's indefensible, and I'm glad that my friend Batya did not try to defend it.
Okay. Chris Hahn, Batya Ungar-Sargon, on that rare moment of agreement, we will conclude this portion of that interview. Thank you both so much, and you can watch Batya.
Kumbaya.
Kumbaya. We can watch Batya at 7 p.m. Eastern, Saturdays, right here on News Nation. All right, we're going to move now to China, because guess what? Beijing is rolling out the red carpet again, this time to welcome Vladimir Putin. It didn't even need to dust the red carpet off because just days ago, President Trump was walking on it, and he just returned from his own two-day summit with the Chinese President Xi. Now it's Putin's turn to meet with Xi, and much like Trump, Putin got the grand welcome, complete with flag-waving ceremonies by China's teenagers and kids. The Kremlin said Putin and Xi will talk about their economic ties as well as other international issues. China is Russia's largest trading partner and has become a lifeline during Putin's war with Ukraine. Russia is China's largest supplier of oil and has become a reliable pipeline because of disruptions from the war in Iran. Putin and Xi call each other close friends. Heck, they've even cooked and eaten pancakes together, chased by shots of vodka, as of course everybody does. But is the friendship the same as it was back then, or are things more complicated now, with two ongoing wars underway? Let's get reaction now from Gordon Chang, a world-renowned expert on China and a senior fellow with the Gatestone Institute and author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America. Okay, you know, from the title of your book, we can obviously see that you believe China has long been dedicated to undermining and toppling America's supremacy. What do you make of this meeting with Vladimir Putin just days after President Trump was there?
Well, the dominant narrative right now is that, oh, this is two strong powers, you know, China being at the center of the international system, the U.S. is being pushed to the side. But, you know, these are two weak powers in many ways. For instance, Ukraine is winning in the war. And that is really stunning. They're taking back territory. They're flying their drones into Moscow unmolested. So I think Putin has a real problem. China has a failing economy, and they've been watching President Trump push the Chinese out of the Western Hemisphere and out of the Middle East. So you got two weak powers that think that they can make themselves stronger by banding together. Maybe they can, but I really doubt it. So I think that the reality of the situation is very different than the dominant narrative.
When you say China's economy is weak, how weak? And is this a moment for the United States to take advantage of? I'd hate to put it that crassly, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, yes. I mean, China is not growing at the 5.0% pace that they reported for the first quarter. Nobody this side of heaven knows where it really is, but it looks to be like onesies or twosies, or maybe at zero, because we're seeing some very depressing data out of the economy for April, underwhelming everybody. So really what we've got right now is a Chinese economy that is stumbling at a time when they need a lot of output to retire debt. They accumulated debt trying to get out of the 2008 downturn, and now they have no way to do so. So China's in a lot of trouble right now. And yes, we can take advantage of it because Xi Jinping, his only hope for growth is to export more. And we Americans account for 31, 32, maybe 33% of global consumption. He needs the U.S. market. Trump can control it.
He needs the U.S. market. Trump can control it. And yet we have Xi in that meeting with Trump last week giving a very stark and blunt warning to Trump that don't mess with China, in essence. We consider China to be ours. This is crucial. The way you handle Taiwan, I'm sorry, did I say China? The way you handle Taiwan is going to be the most important issue going forward in our relationship. Can President Trump use China's current economic weakness to get him to hold off on any aggression toward Taiwan?
The answer to that is yes, but we got to remember, though, that Xi Jinping has decimated the Chinese military with his relentless purges, which have been
intensifying. Right, he's like firing people and sentencing them to death and then suspending the death sentences, but these people are gone forever, very top-tier levels.
Right. The Communist Party Central Military Commission, which controls the Chinese military, has only 2 of 7 members right now. One of them is Xi Jinping, who's not a military officer, and the other, who is a general, is a political commissar. There are no operational officers at the top of the Chinese military right now. So I think it would be very difficult for them to, for instance, launch an invasion of the main island of Taiwan. And that means President Trump can go ahead with these arms sales. That would certainly help countries in the region think of good of the United States. And also, it would bolster in deterrence because Taiwan would be better able to defend itself.
Only 10 seconds left, but why do you think President Trump still hasn't announced those arms sales to Taiwan? It's been, you know, Congress is demanding it happen, or at least some members of Congress are, but from both parties. Why is he holding off on approving that?
I wish I knew the answer to that, because I clearly think that he should do it. He needs to show the Chinese he's not afraid of them. What President Trump is thinking right now, I don't know.
All right. Gordon Chang, fascinating. It's unbelievable that Xi is just firing all of his generals and sending them away to prison. And hollowing out the entire military leadership. To what end is unclear. Really appreciating you joining us tonight. Coming up for us in the meantime, we're learning more about the teenage gunman who police say went on a hate-fueled shooting rampage at a San Diego mosque. Plus, the heroic final acts of all 3 victims that police say saved an untold number of lives. And later, you might have seen the wild videos of so-called teen takeovers, but it's safe to say you haven't seen anything like this one, where teenagers with flamethrowers are up to no good. Well, now the U.S. attorney says someone has to pay for all this, and that someone is the parents. We've got that story ahead. We're learning new details about the horrific deadly shooting at a San Diego mosque yesterday that claimed the lives of 3 at the Islamic Center. But police say the death toll could have been much higher if not for the 3 victims' final acts, which saved countless others, including dozens of kids who were inside the building. At a press conference just a short while ago, police say the victims were trying to draw the 2 suspects away from the mosque when they were shot. One of the men, a security guard named Amim Abdullah, bravely engaged the suspects in gunfire in his last heroic act.
His actions, without a doubt, delayed, distracted, and ultimately deterred these 2 individuals from gaining access to the greater areas of the mosque where as many as 140 kids were within 15 feet of these suspects. Tragically, he died in that gun battle.
Police at that news conference refused to name the suspects. They said they were teenagers who had met online and were radicalized online and shared a broad hatred toward different races and different religions. The 2 teenagers were both found dead after the shooting in a car near the mosque. They died from apparent self-inflicted gunshot wounds. Authorities are now investigating the attack as a hate crime. They say hate messages were found scrawled on the weapon and a manifesto was discovered.
A manifesto that's been recovered. I would reiterate it's early on in the investigation. We are dedicating every resource the FBI has to conduct a thorough analysis of that manifesto to try to learn what led to this, but I think also more importantly, how can we stop future attacks?
Police say the searches recovered more than 30 firearms, all registered to one of the suspects' parents. Police would not say if the parents will be charged at all. But authorities say they were alerted ahead of the shooting by one of the teenagers' mothers. She called police to say her son was missing, and so were all the guns from her home. She also said that he had left a cryptic and hateful note. Police were on the scene at the time when the 911 call came in. They were unable to piece it all together until it was too late. Now to South Carolina, where State Attorney General Alan Wilson is firing back tonight at charges he's playing politics. Alec Murdaugh's defense team yesterday criticized the AG after they filed a lawsuit against the former county clerk, accusing her of jury tampering. At that point, though, Murdaugh's lawyers also took aim at Wilson for saying the death penalty is on the table in the upcoming retrial.
Why is he saying he's going to seek the death penalty? Is there some new piece of evidence? So we're a little sick and tired, and we've seen this process since the beginning of this case, where Alan Wilson plays politics as opposed to playing prosecutor.
Well, Alan Wilson is speaking out to our own Rich McHugh. He said that every legal option is on the table as the prosecutor plans its retrial strategy. Rich joins me now live from Columbia, South Carolina. Rich, that retrial is already shaping up to be really tense and testy. What more did Wilson say?
Yeah. Hi, Elizabeth. Well, Attorney General Wilson says he's treating this case as if he has never tried it before, and that's why, for him and his team, the death penalty is back on the table. He's pushing back hard on the defense and Dick Harpootlian's claim that he's doing this for politics. In fact, he says it's the defense and Harpootlian who are doing this for politics.
Let's talk about the death penalty.
Yeah.
Dick Harpootlian said, ultimately, this is political for you. Would you like to respond to that?
So, Mr. Harpootlian has been a Democratic activist for the better part of 50 years in South Carolina. He was the former chairman of the state Democratic Party. He is a very hyper-partisan person in his personal life, and he has a vested interest in politics at the state level. He has a vested interest in the governor's race. He has a vested interest in the attorney general's race. He has a vested interest in all races. And so he's going to inject politics into this. The reality of the matter is that when the Supreme Court reversed this case, I went to members of my team, and we said that we're going to have to evaluate this case as if it was never tried. And we have to consider and evaluate all aspects of this case, to include our legal strategy, to include the venue questions that are going to be coming up, to include capital punishment.
In addition to filing a lawsuit against the clerk of court, Becky Hill, defense attorney Dick Harpootlian suggested the murder investigation was botched from the start. Yesterday, in a press conference, Dick Harpootlian basically said this was not only jury tampering, but this was a botched murder investigation. What's your response to that?
Well, first off, I vehemently disagree with his characterization that this is a botched murder investigation. I have always believed that the men and women of the state law enforcement division, as well as our federal and local partners who were involved in that original investigation, are very capable, competent people who did an exemplary job in that investigation. And again, you see this all the time in cases, especially high-profile cases, where there's always a desire to attack the people who, not just attack the investigation, but to attack the people who did the investigation. And so we stand by the men and women in law enforcement. I stand by the men and women in this office because they did an exemplary job in the original prosecution of this case, and they're going to do an exemplary job on the retrial.
Now, Wilson says he wants to get this in trial, or at least the beginnings of the trial, before the end of the year. Harpootlian says not even close to that. Interesting to note, Elizabeth, the AG won't be in office when this is tried, and so it's possible that's Harpootlian's strategy to wait for the next AG who could decide not to retry this case at all.
Wow. Rich McHugh reporting from South Carolina. Pretty sure Jim Harpootlian's doing everything possible to ensure a victory for him. We shall see. Great hearing from the Attorney General, though, Rich. Good job. All right, we have breaking news from today's primary elections, and the first race is ready to be called. Decision Desk HQ projects Andy Barr is the winner of the Kentucky GOP Senate primary. Barr had President Trump's endorsement. That primary represents a generational changing of the guard to replace longtime Senate leader Mitch McConnell. We'll have more as more election results come in. All right, coming up for us tonight are teen takeovers coming to your city. It's the new viral trend where young people unleash chaos on businesses, parks, neighborhoods. But could their parents now be punished for their out-of-control behavior? Stay with us. All right, we're just seeing new video from the latest of those so-called teen takeovers, and this new incident takes the troubling trend to a whole new extreme. A witness took video Sunday night as dozens of young people unleashed chaos on a neighborhood in Norfolk, Virginia. And here's something we haven't seen in these teen takeovers before. A masked man, young man, we don't know how old he is, running around with a flamethrower. The group set the ground on fire and damaged property during the rampage. They then bolted when police got to the scene. Similar incidents around the country have left serious damage and real fear for people who just happened to be inside a fast food restaurant or a neighborhood when the teenagers decided to strike. The U.S. Attorney in Washington, Jeanine Pirro, has had enough. Her solution? Targeting the teenagers' parents, starting with fines.
Starting now, parents, you're paying the bills. And if you know where your teen is and what your teen is doing, and you allow them to continue their conduct and continue to allow them to flourish, then we're going to prosecute you.
Pirro says for the most serious incidents, parents could face as much as 6 months in jail for their kids' actions. Joining us now is Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow Rafael Mangual and former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick. Rafael, what on earth is driving this trend? We're seeing it happen more and more.
Well, I think one of the main drivers of this trend is social media. You see this in jurisdiction after jurisdiction where these teen takeovers are organized online. A lot of the fights that happen begin online. And so they're able to spread the information about these meetups far and wide and in very short order, sometimes much faster than law enforcement can respond. And so that, I think, has facilitated a lot of these chaotic meetups. And I think what you see here is the obvious outcome. When you have a lot of unsupervised teenagers, many of whom have some degree of criminal involvement prior to these things, meeting up in large numbers, bad things are going to happen.
Before I get to John, are these just normal kids or are these criminals?
These are not normal kids. I think there are some people in the media that would like to have you believe that this can happen to anybody's teenager, that these could be anybody's kids.
I don't know.
But
Looking at this video, I don't think so.
Exactly right. The vast majority of teenagers in America are law-abiding, are, at home doing their homework, participating in extracurricular activities, and living normal lives. These are not normal lives. These are not normal teenagers. These are often teenagers who are living very troubled lives in very undersupervised environments.
John, we've already seen parents be held liable when their teenager uses a family gun to go open fire at a school. Could parents now be held liable for this kind of mob vandalism?
Elizabeth, absolutely, they can be held responsible. I think, law enforcement, particularly in D.C., is going to go, find out who these folks who have been, breaking the law this last weekend at the Chiboli, kind of looting and throwing furniture and having fistfights, intimidating all the patrons and everybody in the city. And they're going to find out who their guardians or parents are. And they're going to say, look, you potentially are contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Did you enable them or your child to go out that night and to do this? And they'll also look at the history. Has there been a history of the child not going to school, missing curfews, those sorts of things? But I think they're intent on building these cases to kind of send a message that it's not just the children who are breaking the law, it's the parents who are enabling it and not taking responsibility for their children. And we're about to have a long, hot summer, so I think it's an important initiative that's been started.
Do you think this will actually work to deter this behavior? I mean, will parents be able to stop their kids from taking part in stuff like this?
Well, Elizabeth, they won't be able to stop all of the kids from doing these sorts of things, but I think they will be able to stop some of them. Some children will be worried about their parents being charged with the crime. DOJ has a lot of power and a lot of influence that they bring to the table. FBI agents knocking on your door, I think, can deter crime, and I think it will here. I think you'll see quickly that they solve some of these, and then they bring charges against parents, and that word will spread, and I think it will have a deterrent effect.
Raphael, I'm curious, when these kinds of things are organized on TikTok or Instagram, do they actually say, let's go vandalize the Chipotle and terrorize the customers and throw chairs, or is it, sort of marketed as just like let's everybody get together and have some fun, and then it suddenly turns violent for whatever reason?
I think it's closer to the latter. I mean, usually these meetups, are built around some kind of event. For example, there was one in New York City a few weeks ago in which a 15-year-old boy was shot and killed. That meetup began as a planned water balloon fight. But of course, two rival gang members spotted each other at the event. Big fight broke out, and eventually a teenager was killed. So I think, the violence and the chaos happens kind of organically once you have, a signal that nobody's in control of the public space in question. And that's really the main factor here. When these teens, do a takeover in a public space, they often outnumber, any significant sign of authority, which gives them the sign that they are in fact in charge, and then there's not going to be any consequences for their misbehavior, which is what I think encourages the development.
It's not new. We saw wilding, remember, in the 80s. Right. We saw, what was it called in the 90s? Some sort of menace, super predators in the 90s. I mean, kids get together. I have two teenagers myself. Their brains aren't fully formed. They don't understand a lot of times, consequences of actions. But, when you see, it's scary to see a crowd like this, because you're right. Nobody can, nobody's in charge of that.
It's very scary, and that's why it's so important for authorities to step in here and reassert control over these public spaces, because once those public spaces are surrendered, people who want to frequent these restaurants, who want to frequent these downtown areas and public parks are not going to do so. It's asking a lot of them to take chances with the lives of their families if you can't guarantee their safety.
So, John, we had the D.C. Attorney General, U.S. Attorney, Jeanine Pirro talk about, holding parents to account. Have we seen any other states or jurisdictions follow her lead on this?
Well, I hope some will. As you mentioned, Elizabeth, at the start of this, that, they've done this in the situation with children having access to firearms. And so when you have a situation like this where children are going out and going to these kind of meetups or, flash mobs that are going to get violent, then parents have responsibility to know where their children are, particularly if there's been a track record with your child kind of being, not going to school, missing curfews, those sorts of things. So I think you're going to see more folks doing it. I think the one good thing for law enforcement is these young people, they put it all on social media and they videotape themselves doing these criminal acts. And so prosecution will be easier. They'll be able to figure out who these people are. They'll be able to figure out who their guardians and parents are, and that'll make it easier to bring charges.
John, how much of this is a problem of the criminal justice system in our country, especially in some jurisdictions, which, for laudable reasons, I guess, would favor rehabilitation over punishment when it comes to teenagers. But in many cases, that means it's kind of a revolving door when it comes to incarceration of any kind.
Yeah, I mean, Jeanine Pirro has an advantage here. She's got a lot of resources at her disposal as being the U.S. Attorney for D.C., and so that includes the FBI in this situation. In a lot of localities, they don't have all these resources, and so they say, we're going to let some of these things pass. We're going to focus on murderers and people who are, really harming people. But alas, this can really lead to bad things. People can be injured. You had the video there of somebody with a flamethrower, goodness gracious, and then, there can be gunshots fired, and these things can become violent quickly. So I think, it's important to try to stop these things now. I think all localities should look at this. It's just not a bunch of kids at a meetup. It's a bunch of kids getting together for violent activity.
Yeah, there's nothing remotely. By the way, Raphael, when you look at the video that we're now watching, why are they all wearing masks if they don't know that they're doing something wrong?
That's right. They're all in black bloc. They're all masked up. They knew exactly what they were going to go out to do that night.
I'm sorry, somebody was talking in my ear. Did you? Okay, I think we're going to go to some breaking news right now. We are calling the race in Kentucky, the most expensive House primary race in the country. Decision Desk HQ projects Ed Galrine is the winner of Kentucky's 4th district in the GOP primary. We're going to go to Brooke Schaefer, who is at the Massey headquarters. Brooke, this is big news. It's only 7:46 on the East Coast, quite early for this race to be called. You were on the show just about half an hour ago saying they were optimistic there, that they were going to pull this out. This was the toughest race by far that Thomas Massie has faced in his long career.
Yeah, the Massey camp was definitely optimistic. And I should tell you, Elizabeth, I don't think the news has reached this campaign headquarters just yet. Still very much a party mood. You've got music playing, people walking around with Massey signs. We were trying to talk to the Massey camp just a few moments ago. We were told most of the surrogates, the congressman himself, were in the quote-unquote war room. They were watching as these votes were trickling in. But as you said, heading into this, the Massey camp told us they were incredibly optimistic. They thought the congressman was going to be able to pull this off once again. But they admitted there was a concern going into this, and that concern was the president's opinion of Congressman Massey. And we talked to several voters today who told us, yeah, the president's negative opinions of Massey influenced them as they went in to vote today. I even talked to one guy who said he voted for Massey before, but this time he wanted to stick with the president. Congressman Massey has really tried to hammer home this fact that, hey, he still is a conservative. He votes with President Trump and with the party 9 times out of 10. But even still, there were several voters outside of a Kentucky polling location today who told me 90% of the time for them isn't good enough. And this really is proving President Trump still has a grip on this Republican Party. His opinion matters to these voters. Even still, a surrogate here at the Massey camp told me earlier tonight, Elizabeth, that if Massey loses tonight, that he thinks he did this the right way, that he has no regrets with how he has handled his time in office, how he's handled this campaign, saying that Congressman Massey feels like he did not bend the knee.
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Brooke, this is, listen, this is going to be a Republican seat. That was what was so extraordinary about the amount of tension this race was getting with, President Trump talking about it nearly every day. We had Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth traveling to Kentucky to campaign on behalf of Galrine. And the most money ever spent, and there's never any danger this seat will go Democrat. This is a solid Republican district. This was never about holding a Republican seat. It was about President Trump being very unhappy with Thomas Massey and wanting him out of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, an unprecedented amount of money was poured into this race, Elizabeth, about $30 million. That led to record early voting numbers in some parts of Kentucky. At the polling location that I was at today, we talked to officials there who said they were very pleased with the turnout they were seeing, especially given this was just a primary election. And again, we should mention Massey has really tried to hammer this home, that he is still a supporter of President Trump, despite the criticism that he has received. He still votes with Republicans 9 times out of 10, but even still, the president's opinion here seemed to outweigh any of that. And that was an admitted concern from the Massey camp going into this. They said that it is always difficult to go up against the president. And it is clear that President Trump, as I said, his opinion still matters to the voters here in Kentucky. We have not heard from Congressman Massey himself.
Okay.
We are waiting for that news to seemingly trickle in here to the election night party. Elizabeth?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like folks there have gotten the word yet. Probably just as well let them enjoy themselves a little while longer before the news comes out. But Brooke Schaefer, thank you so much for jumping on with us with this breaking news. I do want to thank my last guests, Rafael Mangual and John Fishwick. We sort of got ripped away into breaking news, so I didn't get to say my thank yous. But let's go now to Jeffrey Scully, who is the chief election analyst with Decision Desk HQ. Jeffrey, this is big news. Thomas Massey was a thorn in President Trump's side. He made absolutely no secret of the fact that he wanted him ousted. And today, Republican primary voters in Kentucky have followed the president's orders by, this is a pretty sizable margin.
Yeah, we'll see where it ends up. But there's no question that if you're sort of looking county by county at the returns, Massey really is only doing well in his home county of Lewis, and Galrine is leading virtually everywhere else, and including in the Cincinnati suburbs, where a big chunk of the vote in this district lies. And I think if Massey were in a position to win, he would have been doing better in those places. And he's not, which is part of the reason why we projected it.
Yeah. Are you seeing, I mean, we had heard about all sorts of demographics on Massey's supporters versus Galrine's supporters. What are you seeing in the breakdown on this? Is it a pretty across-the-board endorsement of Galrine as President Trump's pick here? Or are you seeing pockets of, for example, younger voters supporting Massey? Because Massey's been... Listen, he is very conservative, libertarian, really, but he's been willing to take on the president on a handful of issues that have really made President Trump, in many cases, infuriated him, notably over the Epstein files. So he's been sort of this libertarian with his own, who marches to the beat of his own drum and is unapologetic about it. And for many, many years, he was reelected easily because voters liked that.
Yes, and I think in a different world where he had not kind of crossed President Trump more openly on some critical legislation, like the one big beautiful bill that Massey was one of the only 2 Republicans to vote no on.
Right.
And he was the only conservative Republican to vote no on it. The other was a moderate, Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania. And obviously the Epstein files, he was part of a bipartisan charge there, pushing a discharge petition. And then now, of course, the last thing, the coup de grace, is he's been very critical of the military conflict in Iran. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at the outside spending against him in this race, and it roughly worked out, the spending in this race roughly worked out to about $18 million in favor of Galrine and about $14 million in favor of Massey, part of that record-breaking $32+ million expenditure in this race on ad spending. If you look at it, most of the opposition to Massey was groups that are associated with, that are pro-Israel groups, like the Republican Jewish Coalition.
That's a key there.
Yes, and then AIPAC, Super PAC also was a big player.
AIPAC spent very heavily against Massey, but it's interesting you brought up both the Epstein files and the war in Iran. These are two issues that polls show a majority of Republicans wanted the Epstein files released. And while a majority of Republicans support the war in Iran, a majority of America at this point does not. So he wasn't that out of step with a lot of Americans and a lot of Kentuckians.
Well, you know, what's a possible wrinkle in here is that Kentucky has a closed primary system. So the only people who were voting in this race were registered Republicans.
Right.
Now, you know, you could be not registered with a party and consider yourself a Republican or someone who would vote in a Republican primary in a different state where you would have access because of the rules in that state. But in Kentucky, you don't have that access. So it is possible that Massey might have been able to do better in a more open system. That's speculative. It's just, but it might speak to your point that there are some Republicans who would not find this as outrageous, you know.
All right, Jeffrey Scully from DDHQ, thanks so much. Great to talk to you. Good call tonight. Thanks, and we're only minutes away from the next round of poll closings on this primary election night. A big update on the biggest races today and what they could mean as we get closer to the real deal in November. All right, recapping our big breaking news just a few moments ago, Republican Thomas Massey, long-term congressman from the great state of Kentucky, has just been defeated in his primary by the man who was picked to run against him by President Trump and who was endorsed by President Trump. So this is a big night for President Trump. Brian Entin joins me now. You know what? This shows last week it was Bill Cassidy. This week it's Thomas Massey. It's quite something to see.
Yeah, it happened pretty early, too. I thought we were going to start our show.
Yeah.
DDHQ with the win again, you know.
I know
had the results.
They don't know yet at the Massey headquarters. Brooke Schaefer standing there, they're still partying behind her, and I was like,
it keeps happening to us. I was at one of the headquarters too one time that happened. DDHQ beat everybody, and it's like nobody knows. We're the first ones to know every time. It seems like.
Yeah. All right, you've got a busy night ahead of you. Have a good show, Brian. You're in for Chris Cuomo. Great to have you here.
Appreciate it. All right, hey everybody, I'm Brian Entin in for Chris Cuomo tonight. Welcome to News Nation. 6 states across the country are holding primaries tonight, but there is one that we have had our eye on this evening. Elizabeth just mentioned it, the GOP primary in Kentucky's 4th congressional district. It is the ultimate test of Trump's power inside his own party. The president has been trying to oust one of his biggest Republican critics in the House, 7-term Congressman Thomas Massey. Massey has publicly broken with the president on issues like the big, beautiful bill, the Epstein files, and the war in Iran. And DDHQ is now projecting that Massey has lost to Trump's handpicked challenger, retired Navy SEAL and farmer Ed Galrine. This race was said to be one of the most expensive primaries in U.S. history. And we've been following it for days, and here we go. Massey is out. So let's get the state of play. News Nation's political editor, Chris Stirewalt, joins me now. We got the perfect guy to talk this over with. Chris, you know, I was thinking earlier when DDHQ made the call, everybody's been saying, you know, the poll numbers are down with Trump, he's losing his influence, the economy's not great. But then you look at something like this, and it seems like he's still got the power.
Well, I mean, if you have 80% of a third of the electorate, that is still a pretty powerful wrecking ball that you can swing through your party. What is happening right now in the Republican Party, whether it's with Bill Cassidy in Louisiana, whether it's with the state senators in Indiana who declined to go along with the gerrymandering push that the president wanted there, John Cornyn down in Texas, who has tried to pick a middle way to try to stay in Trump's good graces, but not utterly abandon his prior positions. All of these folks are learning a lesson, which is Donald Trump has never been more unpopular. He is more unpopular now than he was after January 6th. He's more unpopular with Americans now than he was at the end of his first year in office after Charlottesville and a self-government shutdown and all manners of disasters. So Donald Trump, in that one sense, is at the lowest ebb of his political life. On the other hand, he's still with that third of the country that's with him. They are really, really with him. And what they're punishing Thomas Massie for isn't that they disagree with him about these things. It is that they disagree with him about opposing Trump and being disloyal and airing the party's dirty laundry in public.
Didn't we think that this was going to be closer? And I know the numbers are still coming in. I was just looking at the percentages, and they change pretty much every minute now. But I went into tonight thinking like this was going to be a really close race and that we might not know until later. And here we are. It's already been called.
Well, DDHQ can't help it if they're good. What do you want, Brian? I mean, they're just they can't help it if they're the best. I would just to caution everyone on these kinds of things. House races are hard to poll. I expect, based on where the vote is out, that those numbers will get a little closer as the evening goes on. So I don't think it will be some 20-point blowout. But I would just tell everybody it's very hard to poll a congressional race. It's hard enough to poll statewide races. Congressional races in northern Kentucky, that's a real tough one.
Is this all Trump, Chris? Or could part of this just be people getting more and more sick of the establishment and people who have been in office for years and years and years and decades?
Whatever Thomas Massie is or has ever been, it has never been said that Thomas Massie is the establishment. He is weird on purpose. He means to be different. He is iconoclastic. People love him. People hate him. But he has been a burr under the saddle, a thorn in the side of every president, Republican or Democrat, as they have passed through the Oval Office. And they have all disliked. Each and every one of them disliked Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie won his previous two primaries with 75 and 76% of the vote. He was very popular there because there is a cussedness in northern Kentucky of, you think about Pete Rose, the baseball player, you think about the kind of iconic hair shirt, intentionally difficult people from places like Campbell County, Kentucky, who look across the river at Cincinnati, look across over at Ohio and say, we're not like you, we're different than you. And Thomas Massie's chip on his shoulder and his independent streak lined up very well with that district for a long time. But the establishment won tonight.
Yeah, I was going to say, what happened? That changed? Them liking the guy with the chip on his shoulder?
I think you can get away with, in the Republican Party, a lot of dissent from Donald Trump as long as you're quiet. And when the president tells you to be quiet, you have to be quiet. And you have to go hide. But as John Cornyn learned and Bill Cassidy learned, if he decides that it's time for you to go, it's time for you to go. And we should remember, in most of these cases, it's immaterial. It doesn't, the Republicans could nominate a dog named Blue to be their nominee in the 4th District of Kentucky, and they would beat any Democrat coming and going. It's a very Republican place. And you can say the same thing about Louisiana, though occasionally Democrats break through down there. Some of these races, the president can cause pain for his party, though, and that is definitely the case in Texas, where he is backing the probable winner in the Texas Senate primary runoff. In the attorney general down there, Ken Paxton, and he is going to cause a lot of trouble for Republicans down in Texas. They're going to have to spend a lot of money and take a lot of time because Ken Paxton is a damaged candidate coming into this. And so sometimes it doesn't matter what Trump does, and Republicans shrug their shoulders and say, we'll go along with it, just maybe he'll be quiet. And now you got one in Texas where it's going to be costly.
And I want to put you on the spot for a second, because in the back of our minds, the reason we're covering this so closely, we're all thinking about the midterms. If the midterms were held today, Chris, who do you think would take Congress?
Oh, Lord. If you held the midterms today, the Democrats would win 30 seats or something. It would be a absolute clobbering for Republicans. It's not close right now, and the Republicans know it, and they have a lot of time left to try to change the narrative. They need gasoline prices to come down. They need the president to quit talking about his ballroom. They need all kinds of things to happen, right? The political environment as it is, the Democrats have won every single special election in a row. I forget how many in a row that they have won. They are outperforming their 2014 numbers. When you look at the most recent Times Siena poll on who do you prefer for control of Congress, among the most likely voters, Democrats are up 14 points, and that tracks with their performance in special elections. The Republicans are upset. They are dispirited because of prices in Iran and a bunch of other things, and the Democrats are fired up and ready to go. So these Republicans need to change the narrative between now and the fall.
So we shouldn't look at what just happened in Kentucky as something that could spread. You think that it's isolated?
Well, I mean, I'll put it this way. Every week that passes, Donald Trump's power over the Republican Party, he's at the zenith right now. He is at his zenith within the Republican Party because he is the sitting president and he has this clout. Again, 80% or better support among Republicans. So that means in these primaries, he has this huge throw weight. But every primary that passes, these are all the last primaries, right? Donald Trump, this is his last midterm. These are the last midterm primaries. So everybody that's off the hook and once they're gone, and think about this, Brian, all these guys that are hanging around now. So let's say John Cornyn loses. So you add one more with the Louisiana, with Cassidy from Louisiana. You add in all of these folks who are like, oh, I got nothing left. They join the Tom Tillis Bolo Tie Club and say, well, I guess I got nothing left to do but say no. So that's where you get the president losing on an Iran war authorization vote. That's where you get a refusal to fund his ballroom. That's where you get that stuff. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. It's nice to see you. Got me in a fancy studio tonight. Normally, I'm in the election RV in some random town, and you're in the fancy studio. So this is a nice little reversal here.
We got to get you out there for some hot dogs and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be doing it. All right. Thank you. I want to turn now to Colin McShane, who's been following other races across the country. We've got numbers still coming in tonight. Let's throw to Connell. He is in the News Nation Election Center. Wow, look at that, Connell.
Now, that's a fancy studio, Mr. Enton, if you want to talk about it that way. And the big night tonight for hand-picked candidates of President Trump is already underway. You and Chris Starwell were talking about Kentucky 4, where the projected winner is Ed Galrine, the former Navy SEAL, picked by President Trump against Thomas Massie, ends up winning this race as projected by our partners at DDHQ, and does so fairly easily and certainly convincingly. So basically what's been happening as we look at the numbers here on the big wall and the margins at 54 to 46 essentially, see you're already with more than 80% of the vote in Kentucky 4, is that Massie is only doing really well in one county, Lewis County, which is his home base. If we dig into the numbers, you get a sense of where this district is in the northern part of Kentucky. Everywhere else, for the most part, it has been Galrine's night. There are counties called the Cincinnati Trio up in the north, so you're pretty much close to Cincinnati, Ohio, in the northern part of that state, Boone, Campbell, Kenton County, and Galrine's winning all of those counties, just up above the word Frankfort on the list there. So it is a big night if you were picked by President Trump to win. So what does that mean? We have some other races just real quick. Ralph Alvarado in Kentucky 6. You'll be watching this throughout the night. We haven't made a call yet, but he is Donald Trump's hand-picked candidate to win there. And, you know, Brian will be watching the Kentucky Senate race where Andy Barr, this is his old district, by the way, Andy Barr is well ahead and has already been called as the winner by DDHQ. So the story of the night comes from Kentucky 4. Would Thomas Massie survive? We now have the answer, and the answer is no, exactly how President Trump ordered it up.
Connell, we'll come back to you as you get more numbers from these other races. I know you're keeping a close eye on it. Thank you, Connell. The question is Trump's decision to throw his weight behind Republican challengers. Big picture here, is it good or is it bad for the party? Let's ask former Democratic Illinois governor, who was pardoned by Trump last year, Rod Blagojevich, and conservative political strategist Rina Shah. It's nice to see both of you. Governor, I'll start with you. Your reaction, Massie is out. Is this what you expected?
Yes, I did. President Trump is leading a political movement that's the anti-establishment movement. Your previous speaker, your guest, is a lot smarter than me, but I disagree with him. I think Massey was the establishment candidate because he was standing in the way of President Trump's agenda to shake up that establishment in Washington and start making government, our government, work for the benefit of the people. The American people are sick and tired and have been for a long time with business as usual in Washington. And President Trump has been leading this movement that's changing things dramatically. And that's why his candidates are winning within Republican primaries. In addition to that, I think Trump is a transformational president. He's historic. We haven't had a president like this since Franklin Roosevelt. And Franklin Roosevelt was very active in the 1938 elections, challenging conservative Democrats who weren't progressive enough for his taste. Trump has done the same thing, but on the other political party and the other part of the political spectrum.
Yeah, and look, I get what Chris was saying earlier, that that Massey's not a typical establishment candidate. But Rena, I do wonder, because when I talk to my friends, people are just sick of the people who have been in office for years and years. They're not happy with the way things are right now. Do you think that this is all Trump's influence, or do you think there's a little bit of that going on too?
I think there's a mixture of factors here at play, but I think there's one big danger here for the Republican Party, and it's that primaries are producing hardliners who excite the base but struggle to build the bipartisan coalitions that are needed to actually pass bills. As someone who's worked many years on Capitol Hill, I can tell you our founders never intended Congress to function as a loyalty club for the executive branch. They wanted checks and balances, not rubber stamps. And I think this wave of score settling really risks handing Democrats a very simple message. It's that Republicans are more focused on internal purges than on solving inflation, border security, or cutting spending. That narrative writes itself if the infighting continues into November.
But Rena, if you're President Trump and you want to get your agenda through, doesn't it just make sense to get rid of the people who are standing in your way?
Not at this point. He's got control. He's got the trifecta. And if you ask me, he's messing this up for himself. This just is simply illogical. This is all about revenge to the president. He is somebody that is only concerned for himself. He understands his age. He understands legacy. He knows nobody's coming to hold up the MAGA mantle after him. JD's way too weak, and so are both of his sons. So I think he understands that, look, it's what it is right now. But the bottom line for November is very important here, and that's being totally lost sight of whenever we talk about this. It's that midterms are always a referendum on the party in power. If this primary season keeps prioritizing purity over electability and actual governing competence, Republicans could really find themselves defending more seats than they expected. Hey, and Trump doesn't care about that, and losing ground with the moderates and the independents who decide these elections.
It's an interesting point Rena makes, Rod. Who do you think, Rod, is going to hold up, as she calls, the MAGA mantle? Who do you think the person is right now?
Oh, I don't know. I think there's any number of potential successors of President Trump, Vance and Rubio and others. But let me just make this point. Rena makes an interesting point, but here's where I would disagree with her. President Trump was elected in an unusual way with a mandate to do the things he said he was going to do. The Democrats have been so hyper against him, opposing everything that he wants. It's impossible to govern. They'll obstruct everything. He needs Republicans on board to keep his promises to the American people. And when congressmen like Massey decide to go off and not support the central part of his agenda, which was that big, beautiful bill that's all about his priorities in government and his economic plan to make things better for the American people, he's absolutely right to make it a priority to defeat that guy and have Republicans who are going to back his agenda, because they're fighting the Democrats who won't be for anything Trump is for.
Well,
Look, he has no respect for the Constitution, and we just need to be very clear. You're a man that served in one of the highest offices of this nation. This is not how the founders designed our system. Trump doesn't care about the Constitution. Our founders wanted the legislative branch to be a strong check on the executive. He hates that. Right now, he wants members proving their personal loyalty to him, all because of what? Just party membership? And so he can do things like set up $1.7 billion funds that are anti-weaponization, our taxpayer dollars paying reparations, essentially. Come on.
You say he doesn't care about the Constitution, but at the end of the day, I mean, the voters are making the decision. This is voters who made the call tonight. It wasn't, in the end, it wasn't actually President Trump. He had the endorsement, but the voters made the call.
Yeah, but primaries. Primaries always bring out the most crazy hardline party members. That's it. That's what we got to remember. These are people that are sitting in party meetings when nobody else wants to.
Yeah, well, the midterms are coming up, so we'll see where we fall. We want to talk to both of you again. Appreciate you both. Sorry, we're out of time, Rod. Okay, you got 10 seconds. You're giving me I got to give you 10 seconds.
The greatest presidents are strong leaders who fought through congressional obstruction. Lincoln was that way. Franklin Roosevelt was that way. Reagan was that way. Trump is that way.
Governor Arena, appreciate you both. Talk to you guys soon. Coming up next, imagine being forced to sell your home even though it's where you plan to stay and raise your family. This story made my blood boil all weekend when I started researching it. It's exactly what's happening to some homeowners in Georgia, and one woman has decided to fight back against the power company who wants to demolish her home and build an AI data center. It is a real David and Goliath story. They're taking their homes, and no other news network is covering this. We're going to, coming up after the break. All right, when I saw the videos Ansley Brown, a young woman from Georgia, was posting to social media, I mean, it just broke my heart. Ansley, she's on a crusade to stop a massive data center, a project that is springing up in her community and communities across the country, from buying and then demolishing their homes, literally just tearing down their homes, and they have no choice. In Ansley's case, it's her childhood home her mother purchased back in 2003, and also her neighbors' houses. And this is allowed because of eminent domain, which allows the government to seize private property with compensation for the public good. And in cases like hers, power companies want to use the land their home is on for power lines to support a new data center. Here is a look at a little bit of what she posted. Look at this.
Look at how close this is gonna run to her house, y'all. Her garden, her chickens, everything is going to be affected by this. She has beautiful, beautiful animals at this property that Georgia Power is threatening to take from her. As you can see here, these little guys are who Georgia Power is threatening. Cow pasture. They want a quarter of her cow pasture. It appears to me that Coweta County and Georgia Power think that American farmers aren't important. Georgia Power, you have enough. You don't need to take any more. Build where you already have. I'm out here on the power lines. Guess what I found? Georgia Power out here tearing down a house. What used to be here was an entire home. This is the exact same project that is taking from my mom. These poor people, Georgia Power already got them. I'm not gonna let them get my mom too.
All right, so they're not just taking people's lands, they're literally tearing down their houses, and they have no say in any of it. Ansley Brown joins me live now. Ansley, it's nice to meet you. I started watching your videos on X over the weekend, and I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking, how could this really be happening to this many people? The woman, I saw the one you were in her backyard, they were taking her swimming pool away. Other people are taking their homes. Have you heard anything new from Georgia Power? Any reaction to your videos?
The biggest reaction to my videos from Georgia Power is that they are now saying that they have offered us 125% over market value. That is true. However, that is tied up in a 1099-S check. So that is not something that we can just roll over into a new home purchase without being penalized.
And how does it work? I mean, do they just show up, like with your mom, do they just show up to the door and say, you got to be out by this date, start packing?
Pretty much. They start slow. So it starts with land surveys, public meetings, whispers of what may or may not happen. And then it turns into, we're interested in your property. We want the entire thing. And this is what we're prepared to offer you. If you don't want to accept it, we can take you for condemnation.
How many people is this impacting?
This is impacting 330 property owners, 21 homes being completely demolished. But that number does not include the neighbors, everybody that has to look at this project, the entire subdivisions that will be affected by this project.
Yeah, I saw in one of your videos, they don't have to tear down the home, but this woman, like the power lines are going to be like 12 feet from her bedroom window.
Yes, and just to give you an idea of what that means while she is asleep at night in her bed, Georgia Power can pull a truck up 12 feet from her window and do whatever they want because they own the property.
So is the data center going to be close, or is this just to get the power to the data center? Explain that part.
So this would be to provide power all the way to a data center that is not in the same county as my mom's house. However, there are 3 other data centers that have already been approved by our county commissioners that will be flush with the Project Wansley transmission lines.
What do you say? I mean, some people have fired back and said, oh, this is for the greater good. AI is the future, stinks for these people. But, you know, somebody's going to have to give up something. They got to get the power lines through.
I recommend that you should offer up your own property, offer up your own home. If you believe that data centers and AI are the change, then why don't you be the change and let them take what you own?
Yeah, you're so badass, Ansley. When I saw your videos, I mean, you know, you didn't have much of a following, I don't think. You started posting I watched your numbers tick up over the weekend, and now you've got people talking about it all over the country and all over the world. And it just, it kills me to see these beautiful houses out in the country that they think they can just bulldoze right over, and that people, you know, even if you get 125%, people don't want to sell. It's your house, and I totally get it. So, Ansley, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Okay, I want to bring in someone now, sort of on the other side of this issue. Stephan Beauchard teaches AI at the University of Mary Washington in Virginia. Stephan, I want to ask you. I mean, you hear her story. It can't help but pull at your heartstrings. I mean, do you think that eminent domain is acceptable in a situation like this?
Well, you know, I mean, when I had the same reaction to her stories, you know, that you had. I watched them on Instagram and TikTok and some of the news interviews. And I think when you lose property, right, for eminent domain, whether somebody's taking your house because they want to build a road or a data center or even kind of a hospital, you're losing part of who you are, right? And I think that we need to be empathetic whenever we have these types of changes. You know, in terms of whether or not this should qualify for eminent domain. You know, I'm not an expert in eminent domain, but, you know, as a society, we've decided that when we need more power, whether it's to build a data center or because there's population growth in an area, that we can exercise eminent domain, then it does seem to be a, you know, an appropriate use of eminent domain. I am glad, you know, I don't understand the legal technicalities of when they can access the money. But one thing I do think is very important is when, you know, anything like this happens in a community with a data center, eminent domain is exercised. These companies, they do have a lot of resources.
So let me ask you, because you understand the big picture here. Sorry to interrupt you, but you understand the big picture, and it's moving so fast with AI. And even when Trump was just in China, and there's this AI race, and we're looking what's happening to these homeowners in small town Georgia. Is this just the beginning of this? I mean, do you think we're going to start seeing them coming after other homeowners all over the country saying, look, we need the power for the data centers, we're taking your house?
I think it's hard to tell exactly in which location, you know, they're going to need somebody's house for some field or those types of things. But I do think that we're going to be building lots of data centers all across the United States. You know, you have Google and XAI, which is about to go public, talking about building them in outer space. There have been proposals to put them in the ocean. We're just at the very beginning of AI.
But where do we draw the line? I mean, you know, you see people getting their homes taken away. There's got to be another way.
Well, ideally, and I don't know the configuration of the power plant and electricity situation in every particular locality, but I do think we need to find ways to build data centers in ways that are the least disruptive to communities. And when the data center companies come in and they build these data centers, they should compensate. They should be taxed at a very high rate. There should be environmental regulations that apply to these data centers. They should have to contribute to the communities, because many of these communities, you know, in a lot of rural areas, they were hollowed out by globalization. And we didn't do anything to compensate these communities. And these companies have resources, and they can contribute to the revitalization of these communities, because there are also people in these communities who will benefit from AI.
And part of me thinks they should, you know, build these folks a mansion. They deserve it, but at the same time, they don't want to leave their house. That's their home where they've lived forever. Stephan, I appreciate you for coming on tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, coming up next, does the name Melissa Casillas mean anything to you? Maybe you've never heard of it, but you should. Melissa, a wife and a mother, she's one of 11 researchers and scientists, many of whom have ties to the UFO community that are either dead or have gone missing. And in Melissa's case, she's been missing now for almost a year. What do we know? And more importantly, what don't we know? There's some new information coming in, and we're going to investigate next. Since 2023, at least 11 top U.S. scientists and government contractors involved in highly classified UFO and nuclear work have gone missing, been killed, or died under mysterious circumstances. The FBI and the House Ethics Committee, they're both now investigating. And one of the missing that has been drawing tons of interest on social media is the case of 53-year-old Melissa Casillas. On June 26, 2025, Melissa drove herself and her husband to work at a government-run nuclear research lab in New Mexico. She said she'd pick him up later that morning, but she never came back. And instead, Melissa drove back home almost an hour away and told her teenage daughter that she'd forgotten her work badge. She decided to work from home, she said. Well, later that morning, Melissa dropped lunch off for her daughter. Her daughter was at work. She brought her Subway. But when her daughter got home a few hours later, her mom's car, it was there, but her mom was not there. Melissa's keys, her purse, her wallet, both of her cell phones, they were in the house, but she wasn't there. And here is where things get really, really weird. The phones had both been factory reset, wiped clean. At 2:18 p.m., Melissa was seen on video walking alone on a highway close to home, and she has not been seen since. Another man who worked previously at the same lab disappeared about a month earlier. So the big question, is there a connection here between Melissa and the other scientists who are missing? Because there does seem to be a connection to this same lab in New Mexico. I want to bring in the CEO and founder of the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases, Morgan Wright. Morgan, it's very, very nice to see you. You've got a very tropical shirt on tonight, so puts us in.
And first time I've seen you, I didn't know you owned a jacket. So there we go. We're both dressed differently.
I'm all dressed up tonight. We are both dressed up. But this case is interesting. It's serious. You know, something I'm hung up on is that the car was there and her keys and work phone, wallet, all of it in the house, but the phones were wiped. What does that mean to you?
You know, Brian, you and I have talked about a variety of things, you know, Nancy Guthrie, a lot of the different cases. And one thing I really harp on, you got to work the timeline. You have to exhaust the timeline. And on this one, it's pretty clear. The phones had to be wiped somewhere between 1:30 and 3:30 that afternoon because of the text that was read by her daughter and one of the last texts she sent. But when you factory wipe a phone, there is a set of steps. You have to intentionally do it. You cannot do it by accident. So there's several steps you have to walk through. And one of the reasons you do that, I mean, one of the reasons, there's several, one of the reasons you can do is to erase any communications, indicating where you might be going, what your plans are, what you might be doing, who you might be meeting. And Brian, there's many stories out there. In fact, there was one here just a couple months ago of a girl, a young lady, 17, disappeared, walked away, found 30 years later, living somewhere else with an extended relative, did not want to be contacted. She walked away from her life. It's not common, but it's not uncommon either that somebody says, she was undergoing a lot of pressures. There's a lot of family issues to just simply erase all of their digital identities and walk away. Now, whether she walked into a wood, we know the New Mexico State Police looked into a blue truck where there was one supposedly around her. They found one similar like that. She didn't get into it, is what they said. So we're really left without a whole lot of explanation except for it's very much, there's nothing to indicate that it's anything but an intentional act at this point, is to wipe your phones, leave your ID, and walk away.
But to walk away from your daughter, who says this is totally, doesn't make any sense. You just bring your daughter Subway at work and then disappear? Like, how does that add up?
You know, Brian, unfortunately, when I was a detective, I worked many suicides. Many times the people made peace with things. They said they seemed fine. They came over, they said hi, they did stuff. And then the next thing you know, they killed themselves. We're trying to rationalize an irrational act, so that's very tough to do. But it has happened before. People have walked away from families. Husbands have walked away. Wives have walked away. They just got tired of the pressure. They went and they started a new life. There's a variety of reasons that it could happen. Now, it doesn't make sense to us because we may not do it, but you have to remember what was in her mind at the time. What did she think was her only solution to get out? For some people, it's suicide. For some people, it's walking away. For some people, it's divorce. So many of the cases I dealt with and we deal with at the National Center involve, only 10% of the people that are in the NamUs database, the National Registry of all the missing and unidentified people, are connected to crime. 90% are non-criminal related. So, and quite frankly, from a statistical standpoint, Brian, about 6.5 per 100,000 people go missing every year in the United States. I mean, those are the numbers when you look at it in the aggregate. What's happening with all of these people? They're not connected. 4 of these people had absolutely no security clearances. Some of these are homicides, self-inflicted gunshot wounds, cardiovascular disease.
But isn't it strange, Morgan, the lab in New Mexico? I mean, what are the chances that there would be several of them from this same lab in New Mexico?
See, that's where, just from a first principle standpoint, I have to go back and say, okay, let's break it down, right? What's the base rate of people who go missing? How many people are in that lab? How many people would you expect to go missing? Is that within the norm? Nobody's established yet what the norm is. Is it outside the norm or is it within the norm? Now, a lot of people say, well, it's Los Alamos, it's classified stuff. I live in the D.C. area. I mean, Brian, I can throw a rock and I can hit people who work for CIA, NSA, NRO, DIA, I mean, you name it. So it is not unusual for people when you have a major employer like that for a certain number per 100,000, a certain percentage of them to go missing. So that's why I said we have to be careful to read into it. We got to interpret the evidence correctly. Too many people go from evidence to narrative, but the interpretation, the context is what's important. Once you put it in context and interpret it correctly, then the gun you found on the floor makes sense as opposed to, well, it's his gun. No. Let's interpret it correctly. I don't know that we don't know everything law enforcement knows, Brian, as you know from the Guthrie case. We don't know everything they know. So we are looking at the public record, but we don't have what the police know on this.
Yeah, that's why I like talking to you all the time, because you stick to the facts. Morgan, thank you. We'll see. You got the FBI now investigating, so we'll see what they come up with. Morgan Wright, thank you for coming on tonight. Appreciate it. Like the shirt. It's like a Florida shirt. Very nice. All right. Coming up next, just when we were moving on from the Hanavirus scare, there's another public health emergency, and this time it's a name that we've heard before, the Ebola virus. And if you think it's far away in Africa and that you don't have to worry, think again, because a little event just around the corner called the World Cup could prove to turn this into a world outbreak. We've got 2 doctors, one who actually had the Ebola virus, and one who's treated it. They're coming up next.
Should Americans be concerned about Ebola?
I'm concerned about everything, but certainly am. I think that, it's been confined right now to Africa, but it's something that has had a breakout.
All right, so he seems somewhat concerned. The question is, should we all be concerned? An American aid worker in the Democratic Republic of Congo was infected with the virus and has been transferred to Germany for treatment. 6 other Americans have also been exposed to the virus and remain in quarantine. So far, the outbreak is linked to more than 130 deaths and more than 500 suspected cases in the Congo and Uganda. The CDC says risk to U.S. public, it remains low, even though the World Health Organization had this to say.
Early on Sunday, I declared a public health emergency of international concern over an epidemic of Ebola disease in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda. And because I'm deeply concerned about the scale and the speed of the epidemic.
So here's where things start to get a little bit scary. We're just a month away from the start of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Matches are scheduled in 11 U.S. cities with more than 1 million international visitors expected to travel to America. So the question is, could the World Cup actually turn into an outbreak? Joining me now, we've got former Trump White House coronavirus response coordinator, Dr. Deborah Birx, and the first person to be treated for Ebola in the U.S., Dr. Ken Brantley. Thank you both for joining me. Dr. Birx, I'll start with you. How concerned should we be, especially when you consider the World Cup is just around the corner?
Well, my biggest concern is we have trained people in Africa. I was with the CDC for a long period of time and then with the State Department. I mean, there's hundreds of people trained in epidemiology, and somehow we miss the detection. And Ebola is not subtle. and DRC has always been ground zero for Ebola. So the fact that the first patient died almost a month ago, which means that they were infected 5 weeks ago, we've allowed this virus to go unchecked for almost 5 weeks. That's unheard of with what we have put in place with the African CDC, which is new and bigger than that last big Ebola outbreak. I mean, what's concerning to me is the systems we put in place did not detect this early enough to really have a comprehensive response, and now we are really behind.
Is the World Cup a concern, though? Does that pique your interest?
Well, there's enough time. Obviously, there's teams coming from West Africa. There is more than enough time to ensure it's in far eastern Uganda, far eastern DRC, western Uganda. It would be easy for the teams and the coaches from Uganda, DRC, and other countries that may be under early threat to quarantine or isolate those teams away from the area of outbreak. It's not in the air. You have to have close personal contact in order to get infected. So if they're not in the area, there's no reason that they would be exposed and infected. And so now it's about protecting the teams and the coaches.
Dr. Brantley, you're an American doctor who is doing service work over in Africa. Now we've got another American doctor in the same predicament you were once in. What was that like? How bad was it? What was your experience like with Ebola?
Brian, first, I just want to say that I'm praying for Dr. Stafford and his family, for all of his colleagues and the entire community around the hospital at Nyankunde. Ebola is a terrible, terrible disease. It is fear-invoking. When I had the illness, I was seeing the same symptoms develop in my body that I had seen in many of my patients who had died. It's a really lonely and fearful experience to be dealing with Ebola.
What were the symptoms like for you?
I had all the classic symptoms that most patients have: the rash, the red eyes, vomiting blood, lots of diarrhea, just lots of general malaise.
Did you hallucinate at all? It's something I was reading about today, that in the final phase, you can sometimes have hallucinations.
I don't remember any hallucinations per se, but I'm sure I was delirious at times and not perceiving reality as it really was, not really thinking clearly.
How long were you sick for?
I was treated in my home there in Liberia for 10 days before I was evacuated to Atlanta, and then I was in the hospital in isolation in Atlanta for another 3 weeks. But it was probably another 4 months before I really felt like I was back to normal health.
Did you think you might die? I mean, how bad did it get?
Yeah, I was near death probably more than one time, and it was really bad. But right now, as you said, the numbers in East Africa are big for the start of an epidemic. We've caught it late, and there are lots of people being affected. And my concern is that we need to respond to those people with care and compassion and respect. We need to be proactive in engaging this outbreak and bringing an end to it in DRC and Uganda before it spreads to more people and more communities.
Yeah, we have just a minute left, Dr. Birx. What should we do now? How do we stop it?
Well, the good news is we have an excellent Minister of Health in Uganda who's on top of this, and they have dealt with Ebola and controlling it very well. So I'm not worried about Uganda. I'm very worried about DRC. If we had known about it 4 weeks ago, you can make a messenger RNA vaccine now in 60 days and do ring immunizations. I mean, we're behind in all of the things that we could have been doing if we had been notified 30 days ago when this first patient died. And again, as the doctor just described, it's not a subtle illness.
Yes,
and so
and
DRC is well aware of what the symptoms are. And so even if your test comes back negative, you've got to presume it's Ebola.
Sorry, we got a hard break here. Dr. Birx, appreciate you. Dr. Brantley, thank you. I'm glad you're okay now. A reminder of everyone tuned into News Nation all night. Stay with us for the primary results. They're coming in from around the country. Connell McShane's on top of it all. We'll be right back after this. All right, so Chris will be back in the anchor chair tomorrow night, and Batya is in for Leland. She takes it away now, monitoring all the primary races across the country. Batya?
Thanks so much, Brian, and you did an incredible job.
Thanks.
Welcome to the program. I'm Batya Ungar-Sargon in for Leland tonight. We start with a live look at Kentucky, where embattled Congressman Thomas Massie moments ago conceded to the Trump-backed opponent Ed Gowrine after what can only be described as a trouncing. Massie, the incumbent, lost by a humiliating 9 points. That's only the first of many major headlines at the ballot tonight. Let's go to Connell McShane with the latest. Connell, what's going on?
Batya, good to see you. Well, you're right. That is the story of the night, the Thomas Massie loss, the Ed Gowrine / President Trump win in the state of Kentucky. The 4th Congressional District was where we had all of our focus coming into tonight. There are also some intriguing races that we'll talk about after we go through that in the state of Georgia, where we know there's a couple of runoffs. So let's start with Kentucky 4. Ed Gowrine is the former Navy SEAL, and now he is the winner in this primary in the 4th Congressional District, a heavily Republican area, so Gowrine is well on his way to serving in the House of Representatives. The margins you were talking about statewide, we're seeing it kind of interestingly play out in some of the areas that we've been watching closely across the 4th Congressional District. Now with almost 86% of the vote in, it is Gowrine comfortably ahead, almost 10 points there, around 55-45. If we dig in a little bit further and we look at the map of the 4th Congressional District, you notice in the northern part of the state is where it is located, and a lot of this is pretty close to Ohio, Cincinnati. So like these areas, if you look up here in the northern part of it, there are 3 counties, the Cincinnati trio in the northern part of the state, where Massie would have liked to have done a lot better than he did. Gowrine pretty much dominated there. So that was part of it. And the other thing, in the rural east, as it's called, the counties right over here in this part of the state, Gowrine, which is heavy Trump country, really ran up the score, and he did so for a convincing victory. So, like I said, Georgia's the other place, Batya, that we're watching very closely. So I want to look at the United States Senate race there in the primary in the state of Georgia, which is already, we know, moving to a runoff. So we're going to see a runoff not only in the Senate race, but we're also going to see a runoff in the governor's race. So going back here for a moment to the big map, we're still on the House side, so I've got to switch it over to the Senate side on the primary, and then when we do that, we go into the state of Georgia right now, and when we have that for a moment, here it is popping up for you. It's Mike Collins going into the runoff. The question is, who's he running off against? Derek Dooley in second place is the former football coach of the University of Tennessee. Buddy Carter, the sitting congressman from the Savannah area, they're running very, very close in this particular race here. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out in top of that. And then on the other side of it, we're looking at the governor's race, also in the state of Georgia, which we also know is running into a runoff, and that is kind of a different type of intrigue. It's at the top of the race. We know who the runoff is. Burt Jones at the top, that's Trump's guy, okay, 37.2. Rick Jackson, self-finance, billionaire healthcare executive, 34.5. You know the name Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia. We know that name from the 2020 election, standing up to the president's claims of election fraud and what have you. Well, he ran at 15%. Question will be, where did those votes go once we get to the runoff next month? So that's kind of the intrigue on the Republican side, both in the Senate and the governor. But you're right, the headline is a good night for the president and a bad night for Thomas Massie in Kentucky.
Connell McShane, thank you so much. Well, Trump went all in on Massie's opponent, Navy SEAL Ed Gowrine, and Massie's loss is being portrayed as yet another example of Trump's iron grip on power. But it's actually about something else, too. Think of the issues that Massie broke with Trump over: Epstein, Iran, and Israel. Massie made an obsession with the Epstein files and a newfound anti-Zionism into the cornerstones of his campaign, repeatedly invoking anti-Semitic stereotypes by accusing Jews and Israel of buying the race.
The difference in this race, what people need to watch, is it's a referendum on whether the Israeli lobby can buy a seat in Congress. And it will be a referendum on foreign policy, whether Israel gets to dictate that by, bullying members of Congress.
Just in case I lose, they gave me the number to call to concede. The area code is Tel Aviv, though.
This wasn't about breaking with Trump. It was about breaking with his voters. Like so many other former MAGA stalwarts, people like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and Marjorie Taylor Greene, Massey was following the clarion call of clicks and online engagement, forming his views to suit the demands of the YouTube comment section and misreading them for the views of middle America. They're not, as Massey's humiliating loss suggests. Kentucky didn't reject Massey because he broke with Trump 30% of the time. They rejected him because people hostile to Jews just can't win mainstream elections. At least they can't on the right. Let's break it down with our panel, Larry O'Connor, two-way co-host of The Morning Meeting, Caroline Downey, National Review columnist, and Democratic strategist Dante Mills. Thank you all so much for being here. So, Larry, let me start with you. Massey is considering this to be all about Israel having bought the election. He referenced this again in his concession speech, which just happened about half an hour ago. We're going to play that for you.
I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv. I have called and conceded the race. We've been honorable the whole time, and we're going to stay that way.
I mean, this is just so repulsive, but I just want to say, to me, his loss is a repudiation, it seems, not just of Massey, but of that whole podcast class that has really turned on the Jews.
Honestly, I feel like you were like hacking into my show prep tonight, because we're going to agree on a lot here. It was so odious, that Tel Aviv line. It's like, I'm surprised he didn't evoke Shylock or something in his speech. It's wrong. But you made the most important point here, because everyone will say, oh, it's Trump and his iron grip on the party and you can't cross Trump. This is about the voters. This campaign, even though, yes, President Trump and his strategist, James Blair, they targeted Thomas Massey here in this primary, but ultimately this was very issue-oriented. This wasn't Massey is mean to me and he's a poo-poo head. This was, he voted against the big, beautiful bill. He opposed me on border protection. He opposed Trump in the first term on border protection, and he's been opposing him every step of the way. It's one thing to be a maverick and vote no sometimes against your party. Massey brought it to the level of opposition. And what you just saw with the Tel Aviv stuff and the Israel stuff and the Jewish vote, it just became gross and odious and, frankly, good riddance. And one last thing, you mentioned podcasters. At some point, all of these people who I'm told are conservative influencers, they're going to have to start influencing conservatives. Because the way I look at it, there's only one conservative influencer. He sits in the White House, and he's got James Blair to carry out his strategies.
All right, Caroline. Massey also, in his concession speech, insisted that they got the young people, and that's really what matters, because they are the future. Are young people with Thomas Massey?
It doesn't appear that way. I think that's still kind of a fringe, small percentage, those who are buying into the grifter influencer message. And they've tried to say for a long time that Trump has lost control of his own movement. And to Larry's point, clearly he hasn't. He's still the kingmaker of the movement. He's the one who, if he didn't invent it, he certainly capitalized on that movement. And he speaks to the hearts and minds of so many Americans. But, you know, it was one thing when Thomas Massey began his political career, and he was a kind of a classic libertarian, Rand Paul adjacent, right? Fiscal responsibility, limited government, low taxes. That's fine. But you become a liability when you start conspiracy theorizing, whether it's the Epstein stuff. And granted, that was a bit of a risk for the Trump campaign to kind of run on releasing those files. But when you start to say it's like this big cabal and it's this massive, you know, machine that has to be unearthed, and that doesn't actually materialize, you start to look like a kook. And, you know, I think at one point he said that a lot of lawmakers had an AIPAC handler. It's stuff like that, remarks like that, that like most people just don't resonate with in MAGA, and the data proves that out.
Right. So, Dante, the president had a new line of attack for Thomas Massey this morning. Let's play that. He said that Thomas Massey is not actually a Republican. Let's have that side.
Thomas Massey's a terrible congressman. He's been a terrible congressman from day one. He's really a Democrat. He votes against us all the time. He voted against the border wall. He voted against men playing in women's sports. He voted against transgender for everybody, the mutilization of your children. He voted against, again, open borders.
I mean, so Thomas Massey is obsessed with the Epstein files, like the Democrats, turning on Israel, like the Democrats, against the war in Iran, like the Democrats. I mean, Trump is obviously, he was mocking him there, but I guess my larger question to you would be, does it not seem like the right is doing a better job of policing anti-Semitism, people who hate Israel, kicking them out of the party, as in Thomas Massey, than the left is, than the Democrats?
Well, listen, I think some of the comments from Massey are just disgusting. You don't say. There's no reason to get into that with politics. But I think that this loss is specifically because he was an enemy of Donald Trump. The one thing about Thomas Massey is he's been consistent as a candidate. He just did not approve any spending, and he's never done that. So when it came to increasing the deficit or any budget, he was going to vote against it. He always has. So for his voters, he's an incumbent. For his voters to turn on him when he's the one that's been consistent, it's clear that had to be an outside influence. That influence was President Donald Trump and the money that was spent to hold a whole campaign against him. I'm concerned about that because when we talk about the redistricting that's happening, where primaries are generally now, that's going to be the general election because the way these districts are set up, if you win the primary, you're a shoo-in for the general election. If the national campaigns can come in, insert money, and decide who wins these primaries, then the whole party is going to look the same. We're losing diversity in party because whoever's at the top is going to say, here's who I want the primary winner to be. They will then win the general election, and we're going to have every politician thinking and acting the same. That's not beneficial for our country.
Yeah, go ahead, Larry. What would you say to that? I think it's a good point.
I don't disagree. I understand the point. The problem is if you've got a majority that's razor thin by 2 or 3 members in the House, like Mike Johnson has, I'm sorry, you just can't afford diversity. And if Hakeem Jeffries gets the gavel, it's going to be the same thing for him, and it's going to be a narrow victory. But you should be concerned. Democrats should be concerned because what they saw here was James Blair, the political guru for the Republicans, focusing just like he did in Louisiana and just like he did last week in Indiana, taking some of that war chest, focusing it on data and getting the right voters out to win an election, and the guy's undefeated. And when you look at the 15, maybe 18 House districts where it's really going to be decided this November, then they've got a secret sauce right now, and they are looking like winners, especially after redistricting.
All right, I'm just hearing the moment we've all been waiting for. Donald Trump reacting to Thomas Massey's ouster. Let's play it.
Buckle up, Batya.
We won the Massey thing. He was a bad guy. He deserves to lose.
I thought he was going to do the dance. I thought he was going to do the dance.
I know, it's a little underwhelming. I mean, Caroline, this is a great night for the president. At a time when he's struggling with bad headlines, right? Does this turn it around for him?
I'm not sure, but I think it shows that he still can call the shots in the party. He can still determine if a candidate succeeds or fails, which proves he hasn't lost his touch. And look, going back to the point about Massey's consistency, I think that's fair. But, you know, to vote against the big, beautiful bill, to be one of only 2 GOP House members that does that, granted, it's because of the inflating the deficit problem, you do kind of stand out because the 2017 results of those tax cuts were quite real, you know, real wage increases for many Americans. You know, you look like you're voting against prosperity, and obviously Trump felt that too.
I mean, by the way, there is, Dante, to your point, there was discussion in the cabinet. There were cabinet members who were opposed to the war in Iran, for example. I mean, Trump is not opposed to having a debate on some issues. But isn't it the case that the Democrats kind of have the opposite problem, that there's no standard bearer? There's nobody to say, look, that is outside the lines of what is acceptable in this party. Hassan Piker must not be allowed to campaign with people who we want in our party. Isn't there an absence of that on the left?
You're absolutely right. And the Democrats paid for that. They did allow themselves to get to a position where extremism kind of grew to a point that the voters turned against it. The Republican Party is going to run into that if they are getting rid of everybody that's either in the middle or opposes any of their views. It's going to turn into an extreme party, and they're going to lose the voters. you know, it's a pendulum. It swings back and forth. The Republican Party doesn't want to get on that train where you get out everybody that's in the middle or just that can go either way on an issue, and you only want people that's all in for you. I think that's a problem. Voters don't like that. They're going to push against that. So I don't think the Republican Party wants to follow the Democratic Party down that line. That was a mistake for the Democratic Party. The Republicans shouldn't follow that.
And Dante, I got to ask you, I mean, we saw Trump endorse Ken Paxton over John Cornyn. John Cornyn seen more as a centrist, Ken Paxton more MAGA. Were the Democrats happy to see that? Do they think that it would be easier to defeat Ken Paxton than John Cornyn?
I think everybody believes it's going to be easier to defeat Ken Paxton, but Donald Trump didn't care about that because he does. He endorses based on people that he know is going to be loyal to him. Paxton has a history that's going to be very difficult to overcome in a general election because a lot of that stuff is going to come out. It didn't hurt him or may not hurt him in this primary because he has the Trump endorsement. I know it's late in the game. I still think that endorsement will get him over the hump, but he's going to have a lot of explaining to do when it comes to a general election. And the Republicans, they need that seat. That Texas seat is important to them. If they lose that, that's a big indicator. I think it's a mistake for Trump to do that, especially at this last minute.
Caroline, 30 seconds left. Do you think it was a mistake for Trump to endorse Ken Paxton?
I think it remains to be seen. I kind of wish he had stayed out of it. I think John Thune privately has said, and I think many people believe he wanted Cornyn. He believed Cornyn was more electable, ultimately, than Ken Paxton.
Larry disagrees, but...
I don't think Ken Paxton's going to win because Trump endorsed him. I think Trump endorsed him because Ken Paxton was going to win. But listen to me, Democrats, Chuck Schumer, every single power player for the Democrats, dump all your money into Texas. I'm all in on Tallarico. Please spend all your millions in Texas. You're going to do it this time, I promise.
All right. Guys, we're very lucky because Larry O'Connor, Dante Mills, and Caroline Downey are staying with us. Tonight, we learned a lot about the race for 2026. But today at the White House, we learned a lot about the race for 2028 as well. That's coming up next. Stay with us. Tonight's election results are the latest example that there is only one kingmaker on the right. A Donald Trump endorsement is worth its weight in gold Trump statues. But what does this mean for his legacy? Trump has taken to doing these impromptu polls at private events, which consist of just two words, JD or Marco. Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio are already being put to the presidential test. They've each had a turn at the briefing lectern now, and let's just say Rubio is more on the varsity league, while Vance seems to be struggling just to make JV.
My hope for America is what it's always been. I think it's the hope I hope we all share. We want it to continue to be the place where anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, where you're not limited by the circumstances of your birth, by the color of your skin, by your ethnicity, but frankly, it's a place where you are able to overcome challenges and achieve your full potential.
Sorry, I'm going to try to read this here. I'm sorry? Okay. I don't... Okay, that was kind of interesting, so I'm going to give you the question. This is crazy. You guys got to behave yourself.
It's not just about these performances. Marco-mentum is officially underway, and it's not really a mystery. I've said it before, and I will say it again. I know a lot of Democrats who would pretty happily vote for Marco Rubio, and a significant number of Republicans who would not vote for J.D. Vance. Let's bring our panel back in, Larry O'Connor, Dante Mills, and Caroline Downey. Dante Mills, you're a Democrat. Would you vote for Marco Rubio?
It depends on who he's running against. I'm not anti. Listen, I believe that a vote has to be earned. Just because you're a Republican does not mean I would not vote for you. My problem with Marco Rubio is kind of the opposite of we just talked about Thomas Massie, where he was consistent. Marco has not been. He's kind of morphed a lot from when we first met him, even when he first ran for president, until now. Now he presents very polished, but is that smoke and mirror? Does he look clean and polished because he's always walking beside somebody that is more extreme in President Donald Trump? You know, and will he continue to be that as president, or will his views kind of go back to being a little extreme? That's what I would want to flesh out before I would give anybody my vote. I need to answer those questions.
There was, of course, that devastating Susie Wiles quote in the Vanity Fair piece where she said that, you know, J.D. Vance's shift from anti-Trump to pro-Trump was political, whereas Marco Rubio would never say something he didn't believe in, so it took a little bit longer. Caroline, do you think that young people, that Vance has the youth vote kind of locked up on the right? I mean, I have noticed that in the polling, even the polling that now is suggesting that Rubio is kind of catching up to him in the polls. Young people do seem to prefer Vance.
I think Vance is appealing to a lot of young Republicans, but I wouldn't underestimate Marco Rubio's sway with them as well. I think just the proliferation of the memes about Marco Rubio and how competent he is and how he keeps adding on another random miscellaneous hat that is totally not his job because no one else can be trusted but him. I think that says a lot. A lot of young people are perpetuating, that meme, which is an endearing, complimentary one. But I think it's a good thing that we have to choose between Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. This is a great problem to have. They're both very impressive communicators. Obviously, they come from different political backgrounds in the sense that Marco Rubio was always more old school, less isolationist, whereas J.D. Vance obviously was more for fiscal or foreign policy restraint. And I think that we've seen that a bit in how we've conducted, the Iran war. But they've both been pretty good at diplomacy, but I do think that Marco's star has exploded, and I think that's why you see J.D. Vance maybe tackling this fraud issue and being really gung-ho about that, because he notices that maybe he's not quite keeping up with Marco, and so we're seeing some healthy competition between the two, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, the healthy competition is certainly a good thing. There's a deep bench there. Larry, I never put it past the GOP to make the wrong decision and to steal, defeat from the jaws of victory. But it seems like Rubio himself wants people to think that he's not interested in this. Let's play this recent comment that he made about whether he's going to run.
Would you want to be president?
No, look, I know this is going to sound like the typical job. I'm going to be in this job for the next 2.5 years. I'm going to do that job. I'm going to finish the job for this president. I'm enjoying it very much. JD runs for president. I think he'd be a phenomenal candidate. I've said publicly, and I'll say it again, I'll be the first person to sign up and support him. I think JD would do great.
Would you want to be a vice president?
I want to be the Secretary of State, and I'll worry about the future in the future.
I mean, is he being serious there, or is he just kind of trying to push off the inevitable? Dante's shaking his head. What do you think, Larry?
Listen, this is a typical Gen X, right? It's like, whatever, I'll do my job. It's fine. By the way, J.D. Vance has some pretty epic memes about him out there, too, with the balloon face and the curly hair. And Marco's not the only one with memes. Listen, he has an advantage right now, Marco does, because he's got a very real job. What did John Adams say about the vice presidency? It's, like a bucket of spit or something like that? I mean, J.D. Vance doesn't really have a job. His sole responsibility is wait for something horrible to happen or go break a tie in the Senate. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio is flying around the world making peace, waging war. I mean, obviously he's going to be elevated. Also, you guys, I mean, I don't know if this is like a J.D. Vance subterfuge operation here, but by saying Marco Rubio is super popular with the media and the Democrats, you are ruining him with Republicans.
That's my strategy.
Now I'm super suspicious about it. I see what you're doing. Oh, Democrats love Marco. All right, he's dead to me.
Unanimously approved by the Senate.
That is a great point, Larry. Larry O'Connor, Dante Mills, Caroline Downey. What an incredible conversation. God bless and protect you all. Thank you so much for joining us on this very important evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Trump had a great night tonight, which is a welcome change for him. He's drowning in bad headlines. But before Democrats celebrate, they may want to look at California. We'll tell you why. Trump is having a great night. But that's unusual for him these days. He's been drowning in a flood of bad headlines. There's his new anti-weaponization slush fund, $1.8 billion set aside by the Justice Department to reimburse people prosecuted by the Biden DOJ, including those who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche attempted to defend it.
Anybody in this country is eligible to apply if they believe they're a victim of weaponization.
Mr. Attorney General, let me ask you this. Are there going to be rules that say that if you've assaulted a Capitol Hill police officer or committed a violent crime, you will not be eligible? Why not make that a rule?
I expect that, because I'm not one of the commissioners setting up the rules.
Vice President J.D. Vance did not rule out the possibility that people who beat up cops on live television could claim financial rewards. Yuck. The Justice Department also granted President Trump, his family, and his businesses immunity from inquiries into their taxes. Again, yuck. This is the exact stereotype of Trump that the left likes to paint, that he thinks he and his family are above the law. Then there's the war in Iran, which is looking like it might turn into a quagmire for all the progress the administration has made of late. There's the cost of gas, $4.50 a gallon, and it's really hurting working-class Americans. And there's overall inflation, which is going in the wrong direction. These are all real problems. But what's the solution to these problems? The Democrats want you to believe that they are the alternative to all this chaos, telling voters that by simply electing them, all the noise and drama of Trump will simply go away. The strategy worked for Biden in 2020 and even in the 2022 midterms. Remember this?
As I said earlier, my dad used to say, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative.
But the same can be said of the Democrats today. The alternative to Trump is the Democrats. Actually, it's California Democrats. At the top of all the polls for 2028 rank former Vice President Kamala Harris and California Governor Gavin Newsom. And if you want to know their answers to the biggest problems facing Americans, just look to their state, California, where gas doesn't cost $4.50 a gallon, it costs $6.15. Homes cost $400,000 more than the average home across the nation, thanks to their extremist environmental restrictions on where you can build and how. Groceries cost 8 times more. 8 times more! Are you struggling with your electricity bill? In California, electricity is 98% higher than the U.S. average. California makes up 4% of the entire U.S. economy and has the 4th biggest economy in the world. But it suffers from extreme income inequality. The rich are obscenely wealthy, hoarding themselves while the middle class vanish.
Gas. It's also about the entire energy sector.
Congressman Kiley, what did you make of this sort of red surge in California? You're from California. I mean, is this a referendum on, blue state decline and the Democrat rule?
Well, I can tell you that folks in California believe our state is way too unaffordable. And I think there is a coalition for common sense that is ascendant in California that is looking to restore some sanity and balance. And so on the issue of gas prices, I mean, we have far higher gas prices in California than anywhere else in the country. We're some 40 cents higher than the next closest state. We're way higher than Hawaii, which is an island state. And of course, the conflict in Iran has raised everyone's gas prices. And that's one of many reasons we want to bring it to a quick and expeditious end consistent with our national interests. But in California, there are unique policies that impact our citizens in uniquely harmful ways. So, the gas tax is higher than any place else in the country, 61 cents a gallon. You have all manner of regulations that add much more to the price. You have a specific fuel blend that is really just unique to our state, which is very difficult to satisfy. You have refineries that are now shutting down. We're importing gasoline from across the world, including the Bahamas, which, by the way, is really bad for the environment because it comes in on these huge gas-powered tankers. So all of these things have meant that Californians are paying $6.15 a gallon right now. We were paying more before the conflict in Iran than the rest of the country is paying now more than weeks into it. And so one specific thing that I'm proposing that should get a vote very soon is I propose the Gas Tax Reduction Act that puts a cap on how much states like California can tax their drivers.
Congressman Subramania, would you support that bill?
Likely, I'd like to see the language, but I would support at least a temporary reduction of the gas tax.
I want to play this for you. This is Governor Newsom on how he fights Republicans.
We have agency. We have a responsibility. It's just like the issue of redistricting. We could have decided to write an op-ed. We could have decided, hold hands, have a candlelight vigil, win the argument. These guys are ruthless on the other side. Trump's not screwing around, and nor can we. Yeah, it's uncomfortable fighting fire with fire. Yes, we all want the better angels. Yes, we want the Sorkin sound and music, little West Wing. I do. But we'll lose our country.
I mean, is this guy really the best messenger, Congressman Subramania, for the Democrats going forward, given that he represents all of the failures of California?
Some people like him. I mean, they liked him enough in California to elect him. And so I don't know. I think people like that he's forceful in his messaging. They like that he's funny in some of his messaging. So I don't want to say he's the best messenger, but he's definitely a loud messenger and has gotten a lot of attention for it.
All right, Congressman Kiley, I want to talk to you about this slush fund. I'm just repulsed by this, I have to be honest with you. I think it's so terrible. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance trying to defend it.
There's going to be a process to ensure that that money is only given to people who have actually, I hate to say earned it, but the people who actually were really mistreated by the previous administration and Department of Justice.
Your reaction to this news?
I'm just warning about it. I don't like it. I don't like the idea that this is going to be, I guess, just, the funds are going to be distributed in a completely discretionary manner. It reminds me of an amendment that came in from the Senate in a bill several months ago where senators who had had their phones tapped in what was, I believe, truly an egregious abuse of power, but nevertheless, we did have now fixed that process by which that, that civil liberties violation was allowed to happen. But the senators decided to put in an amendment saying that the specific individual senators who had their phones records monitored were going to have a private cause of action to get something like, what was it, $500,000 each? And so I'm not really sure that this is the role for certainly Congress or really the administration to just be, doling out these payments.
So, Representative Subramania, what the right would say is, the Democrats started it. They weaponized justice against Trump. What are we supposed to just do, sit on our hands and let them get away with it? And my question to you, I guess, is like, someone has to be the first to lay down the arms. Can you say that going forward, if the Democrats take power again, that they will stop doing the things that the Biden DOJ did to Trump? Like, can any side be the adults in the room?
Oh, I would disagree that the Democrats weaponized the Justice Department the way Trump has. Nowhere near. And I don't even think they weaponized it. Trump committed crimes. He was indicted. And so that's very different from what Trump is doing now, which is trying to come up with excuses to prosecute political enemies that he doesn't like, trying to find ways to enrich himself and his friends, and trying to find ways to skirt prosecution or accountability himself while continuing some of his corruption. So I would say it's nowhere near on the same level, and it should all be accountable. If a Democrat commits crimes or is corrupt, then they should also be prosecuted. Everyone should be accountable, and no one is above the law.
So that's a yes to laying down the arms. All right. Congressman Sua Subramania and Congressman Kevin Kiley, thank you both so much for joining me. God bless you and protect you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Nobody ever asks America's farmers and truckers about foreign policy. So we're going to do that. That's next.
We're going to end that war very quickly. They want to make a deal so badly. You're going to see oil prices plummet. They're going to come down. There's so much oil out there. They're going to come plummeting down. But we're going to have to make a little journey down to a place called Iran. We have to stop them. They have nuclear on their mind, and we're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon.
President Trump has made his message crystal clear. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's a principle even Democrats agree with, though of course they won't give Trump props for protecting our children and grandchildren from a nuclear-armed terror state. The problem is there is a big cost, and it's being borne by the hardest working Americans. Thanks to the conflict, the cost of gas is up by $1 a gallon. The cost of diesel, which our truckers and farmers rely on, is up $2. Axios is reporting that farmers across the Midwest are growing desperate amid rising energy and fertilizer prices. So how do farmers and truckers feel about this? Is the trade-off worth it? Joining me now to share their thoughts are John Boyd, founder of the National Black Farmers Association, and Gord McGill, a truck driver and author of the book End of the Road. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm just so honored to have you. Let me start with you, John. I imagine the cost of diesel is just crushing you.
It is, and the high cost of diesel fuel, my tractor holds 100 gallons.
Wow.
100 gallons of diesel fuel.
Wow.
And at $6 a gallon for off-road diesel fuel, that's $600 every time I fill up my tractor. the price of fertilizer has increased 35%. That's $140 a metric ton for America's farmers. And for the good fertilizer, it increased about $200. So this is on average about $100,000 for an American farmer at the end of the season. And that's a hard sell for a banker that you're sitting in front of that you didn't plan for these high costs at the beginning of the planting season. Fertilizer is the first step in farming. So before you put your seed down, you apply your fertilizer down, and then you have to have diesel fuel for your tractors and everything on the farm that runs off diesel fuel. And the president went to China. He went to China and said come up with some things that he thought would help, but he also backstepped on the issue that I've been fighting on for a very long time, is to selling American land.
Mm-hmm.
For China to be able to buy land in the United States, I'm 100% opposed to that, and I spent a long time speaking out against it because China bought some adjoining acres from me, and so I'm opposed to that, and I hope that the president will reconsider his position on selling American farmland to China.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, Gord, same question to you. Truckers, they must be just absolutely breaking under the weight of this. Do you think that they're turning on Trump, or do you feel that people think that the goal of preventing a nuclear armed Iran is worth it and that Trump is right that gas will plummet when that's finished?
Truckers are a pretty diverse group of people, as you know, Batya, and lots of different political opinions. So it's hard to say where everybody in the trucking industry is on the question of President Trump. But certainly, we're all looking forward to a resolution with this crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. Trucking, typically trucking is 1/3 overhead, 1/3 paying the driver, and 1/3 fuel. And that ratio is totally out of whack right now and is making it extremely difficult for operators to stay afloat. Another move President Trump could make to help ease that burden and for our farmers is in previous administrations made it extremely difficult for refiners to keep diesel upgrading facilities open, and a number of diesel refineries closed in the administrations leading up to President Trump's. And maybe he could do something about that and help producers here get more product on the market, failing any resolution in the Straits of Hormuz.
And Gordon, there was some good news for truckers last week. There was a Supreme Court decision that was unanimous that came down that said that freight brokers can now be held liable for dangerous truckers and haulers, for these carriers that are often, these very irresponsible, negligent carriers that will hire illegal labor, for example, resulting in, crashes and things like that. Could this result in rising wages for truckers, do you think? Or do you think this will result in rising costs because now suddenly the brokers are not going to want to work with the cheaper illegal labor?
Well, I think it's going to end up being a net plus for American truckers, because what's happened is previous administrations' poor policy choices and the decision of President Biden's 2021 trucking task force, which basically flooded the market with all kinds of third world labor. And unfortunately, those guys work for the type of chameleon carriers and other bad actors who have terrible safety ratings. And the brokerages and the intermediaries are going to be thinking long and hard before giving those guys loads. And we're already starting to see capacity in the trucking market constrict downstream of the Montgomery decision from SCOTUS last week. So I think this is actually going to be of great benefit to America's truckers.
I hope you're right about that. And John, we have 30 seconds left. If the Trump administration could do anything to help you, what would that be?
Stop farm foreclosures today. Stop farm foreclosures.
Wow.
This farmers should not be losing their farm due to tariffs and the war and high diesel fuel, all these things. The administration needs to put a complete farm moratorium on USDA loans, guaranteed loans, secondary agricultural lenders today, a complete farm moratorium. And we have 200 farmers facing foreclosure that nobody to help. No companies came to our help. The administration, Congress hasn't done anything about it. We should not lose our farms.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless and protect you. That does it for us. Leland's back tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello and welcome to Katie Pavlich Tonight. Well, voters in 6 states turned out for primary elections today, but most eyes were on the Republican contest for Kentucky's 4th congressional district, where Trump-endorsed candidate Ed Galrein has defeated incumbent Congressman Thomas Massie. The electoral fight became the most expensive U.S. primary in American history and ended in another victory for President Trump as he works to position his party to retain control of Congress in November, even without his name on the ballot. And here's what he told our Kelly Meyer as soon as the results were in.
We won the Massey thing. He was a bad guy. He deserves to lose. Thank you very much, everybody.
As for Massie himself, he says tonight's loss was God's will, but that didn't stop him from using his concession speech to smear his opponent. Here's how he kicked off his remarks tonight.
I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv.
Well, running a campaign obsessed with Israel when your district is in Kentucky, while simping for terrorists and foreign regimes who murder Americans, was a really stupid idea. But more importantly, President Trump won Massey's district by 85%, and yet Massie fought him and the Republican agenda every step of the way with his votes on Capitol Hill. Massie reportedly used taxpayer funds for his campaign, voted repeatedly against border security, against tax cuts for working Americans, and much, much more. Democrats in Washington, D.C. loved Massie in Congress. But voters in Kentucky's 4th district voted Ed Galrein, a former Navy SEAL who deployed on dangerous missions around the world, a man who cites President Ronald Reagan as the reason he joined the military. Over 3 decades of service, he received 4 Bronze Stars and 2 Presidential Unit citations for extraordinary heroism against armed enemies. And he reflected on how his years of serving our country prepared him to represent his district in Congress in his victory speech. Take a listen.
For the same reason I entered as a Navy SEAL officer in 1983, because I had the audacity to think I could make a difference, and I did. I will serve this district, my party, and my nation with that same audacity to make a difference for them, their families, our district, our party, and our nation. God bless America.
Galrein ran a campaign dedicated to representing the people of Kentucky's 4th congressional district. Massie relied on podcasters and internet people. Galrein also convinced real voters on issues they care about and proved to be a definitive winning strategy. But looking ahead, President Donald Trump's candidates are winning in race after race, and Democrats should be worried about that as we head into November. News Nation host Connell McShane is tracking results in tonight's biggest races. Connell.
Good to see you, Katie, as we welcome you into our new and improved big board here, powered by our friends at DDHQ. And you're right about the president's handpicked candidates. That is the story of the night, beginning, obviously, in Kentucky for the U.S. House of Representatives with this victory that we got an early call on for Ed Galrein, the former Navy SEAL, the president's pick to defeat Thomas Massie, who had been a thorn in his side on so many issues. And Galrein really did it easily and did it convincingly in Kentucky. 55-45 is your basic 10-point spread with almost all the vote, 88.5% now in. As we dig a little bit deeper and we'll look at the map here of the district in the northern part of Kentucky and part of the northern kind of suburbs of Cincinnati, Ohio were important. Those all seem to go for Galrein. Then in the eastern part of the state, which is rural, Trump country, very heavy for Galrein. Massie really won, and Lewis County was the only place he performed well, which is his home county. And, you know, it's interesting to follow up on this theme and back out and go to the United States Senate primary in the same state. And that also is really a big night for President Trump. Why? Andy Barr, where we see the check mark next to him with 60.4% of the vote, was the Trump-picked candidate over Daniel Cameron, who's run statewide before and is the former state AG there. The eastern part of the state, just pick up some counties here, like Pike County, 60.5% of the vote in Pike County goes to Barr. All of those counties that were coming in early, not counties and other examples, 67% to Barr, were very, very favorable for for congressman. Now, soon to be, the hope is for him, Senator Barr in Mitch McConnell's seat there as he's running to try to take the place of McConnell statewide in the state of Kentucky. There's your statewide results now. We're up to 83%. Ian, now, the other things, we are watching some Democratic races, and we could flip it over to some of the House races in Pennsylvania for a moment, and you'll get an idea of why. And there's two races in particular that I'll highlight here. One's in Pennsylvania 3. This is a heavily Democratic district in Philadelphia, and we're really watching to see where, and now Christopher Rabb taking the lead at 41% over Shreve Street at 30%. The energy of the Democratic Party is going in to the fall race. So Rabb's a guy who's endorsed by the progressive left, AOC, squad members, they're all for him. Street is seen as more of an establishment candidate. And now, after earlier in the night, the race being very, very close, it's Rabb who is, even though we haven't called it yet, opening up the lead. The other race there in Pennsylvania that we're watching really is in Pennsylvania 7. And we just did call this for Bob Brooks. Now, Brooks, this is an interesting race because it's in the Lehigh Valley, and if the Democrats want to win and take control of the House of Representatives in the fall, they're going to need to win races like this. Brooks spent 20 years as a firefighter in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and wins it. He was endorsed by the governor, Governor Shapiro, over Lamont McClure, and wins it easily. Here, 41-21 is where we have it, and Brooks is the winner. This is a Republican-held district. McKenzie is the congressman right there at the moment, but nearly, or I should say barely, won his race the last time around against Susan Wild, and now it's Brooks who's going to look to take it back for the Democrats. If we go back to the map again, I want to end on the state of Georgia. Okay, so the U.S. Senate race in Georgia, Mike Collins is going to be involved there in a runoff. It's now up for grabs as to whether Derek Dooley will be the candidate. He's in position now because you have to get to 50 plus 1% to run against him. Buddy Carter in third place there, 26.1%, is still in the running. And then we look at Georgia, say, where are the votes? Well, of course, Fulton County. Will they find the votes in Fulton County? That's always where you're waiting for votes in elections in Georgia, right in the Atlanta area, and they still have 52,000 votes outstanding. So that'll be kind of interesting to watch. It's one of two runoffs that we're watching. Katie, as to go back to you, and I know the Georgia race, we have a governor's runoff as well. The state Supreme Court race is interesting there because the former president, Barack Obama, got involved with some of the liberal candidates, but all his candidates are trailing there. So it looks like it'll be a good night for conservatives in that as well. Something very close to watch in the state of, interesting to watch in the state of Georgia.
Absolutely. Well, Colin, you look good in that new setup there. So we'll be seeing you, I know, in the future. We've got a lot of primaries ahead and, of course, the November election. So thank you, Colin McShane. Great to see you. All right, now let's bring in progressive YouTuber Brian Tyler Cohen along with Ashley Davis, national security expert and author of The Power Pivot. Thank you both for being here to react tonight. So, Ashley, just your reaction to Thomas Massie's loss, fresh off the press.
Well, I'm super happy, to be honest with you, because I think that, number one, the speaker is probably the happiest man in the world right now. I mean, nothing to do with the president. Let's just take that out of it. But Massie has done nothing to move forward the agenda even before President Trump was in. He was always the vote that was going to vote no. It wasn't like even his Senator Rand Paul, who just would not vote. You know, he doesn't vote against things that ended the deficit. Everyone knows that. No one depends on his votes on those type of things. But Massie just voted no on everything. So I think it's a really positive move for Republicans. If we do end up holding the House, at least we have a vote that we can count on.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Speaker Johnson is always relying on the math, and to have one less person who is constantly saying no will be helpful to him over the course of the next couple of months, certainly. Brian, of course, President Trump had a big hand in this. He actively helped campaign against Thomas Massie. We saw the Secretary of War down in that district ahead of this election tonight. It's clear that President Trump is still the leader of the Republican Party and still putting wins on the board. But what about Democrats? I mean, you have former President Barack Obama, who went into Georgia, campaigned for the Supreme Court case in that state, losing tonight. Sarah Warren will keep that seat. So who's the leader of the Democratic Party at this point if the former president can't win a seat like that in Georgia?
we'll figure out who the leader of the Democratic Party is soon enough. I mean, we have an election coming up for midterms, and, you know, that's what our focus is on right now. Obviously, after that, we're going to have God knows how many Democrats throw their hat into the ring, and we'll figure out who the leader of the Democratic Party is shortly thereafter. But I think it's interesting that in none of the lead up to what you're discussing now with Thomas Massie, did anybody name the #1 thing that caused Donald Trump to push out Massie in the first place, and that was his support, Massie's support for the Epstein files. That's why this is all happening. That's why Donald Trump turned on him, which is especially ironic given the fact that Trump and all of his administration officials were falling over themselves to demand the release of the Epstein files when they were just on the campaign. But as soon as it became clear that Trump was implicated in those files, that his name was listed in those files, God knows how many times, then all of a sudden they wanted Massie out.
Brian, we all know that President Trump signed legislation to release millions of Epstein documents, and he is not implicated criminally in any of this.
3.5 million files they refused to release.
In any of this. So for you to imply that there are crimes committed is completely dishonest. Ashley, your response to that.
So then why don't they release the other 3.5 million files?
That's not why President Trump went after Thomas Massie, as Ashley eloquently pointed out. But Ashley, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that. I mean, Massie's been a problem for a long, long time. I mean, obviously, this is his 8th term. I mean, he doesn't vote with us ever. So I understand your talking point in regards to the Epstein files on the Democrat side, but that has nothing to do with how bad of a Republican member he was.
Neither one of you think that the Epstein files had anything to do with Trump turning on Thomas Massie?
No,
Brian,
Massie hasn't voted for any of the Republican priorities. Not the big, big beautiful bill. Nothing.
It's funny to me. I understand. Like, everybody has to pretend that the Epstein files on the right has to pretend the Epstein files are not a thing anymore. But everybody watching and everybody who's going to see this on the internet is going to know how clownish all of this is. That you are both pretending like the Epstein files had nothing to do with this, when the people that Trump has turned on, he's done as a direct result of their support
Brian,
for the Epstein
files. The president has been very clear over and over again for months why he believed that Thomas Massie was not the man for the job. The person who replaced him is a former Navy SEAL who is going to go in and vote for the party, for the country, for the president's agenda, when this is a district that President Trump won by 85%. So I know that Democrats only started to care about the Epstein files when it was politically convenient for them. They had nothing to say about it for 4 years under Joe Biden when he was in charge of the DOJ. They were releasing nothing. President Trump is the one who decided to sign the legislation to release these documents, and I find it quite interesting that when I ask you who is the leader of the Democratic Party, when Barack Obama and Kamala Harris got their butts kicked tonight in Georgia and in other places around the country, losing that Supreme Court case in Georgia, losing the redistricting fight in Virginia, losing the fight in Louisiana, losing the fight all over the map, you want to change the subject and talk about the Epstein files once again.
Answer me just one question. Did they release all of the files?
They are in the process of redacting to release all the files because we want to make sure, and I would hope you would agree with this. Look, I'm not going to allow a conversation that's supposed to be about elections to be derailed by you to talk about the Epstein files when you don't want to talk about how the Democrats lost tonight. They continue to lose. Ashley,
Thomas Massie is not in Congress for one reason.
Democrats are losing to President Trump. He is the leader of the party.
He co-sponsored the Epstein files.
Brian can't even tell me who's in charge of the Democratic Party because Barack Obama clearly isn't. He keeps losing.
Of course
so
he's
Ashley,
not.
what shape are Democrats in when it comes to November? Brian, stop talking over me. I'm going to cut your mic. Stop talking over everybody. Nobody can hear you. No one can understand what you're saying. We'd like to have a conversation, not a talking over each other. Ashley, please assess the situation for Democrats going into November, considering they lost tonight, they continue to lose these redistricting fights, and they have no money going into the elections in November.
Well, listen, I think obviously if you look at any historical race in regards to a midterm, it's going to be very tough for us. And I think it's going to continue to be. However, we have had a lot of things that have actually gone our way in regards to some of the Supreme Court cases, in regards to redistricting, in regards to some of these good candidates. I mean, listen, I've known John Cornyn for a long, long time. I thought it was very interesting today. The president came out and he endorsed, obviously, the Attorney General, Paxton. everyone knows that he has a lot of personal issues coming into this, but he was still the most popular candidate. And I think Tellerico is actually a strong candidate. I'm going to give Democrats the benefit of the doubt there. He is a good candidate. However, I think Paxton's what the president's doing right now, which is what he's been saying he's going to do. And by the way, Katie, he hasn't even unleashed all of his money.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to start, James Blair's leaving the White House here in the next couple weeks, and they're going to unleash this, huge machine that the president has and has built, not just with money, but with people. And I think that's how we can actually win.
Run. I appreciate both of your time. Ashley Davis, Brian Tyler Cohen, thank you for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, well, today the Senate advanced the Democrats' resolution to limit President Trump's war powers in Iran. 4 Republicans joined Democrats in voting for the resolution, including Bill Cassidy, who just lost his primary to a Trump-backed opponent. And lawmakers are looking to limit Trump's authority with Iran, even as we're seeing disturbing images like this one with state TV hosts firing off guns and threatening our allies on Iranian state TV. I spoke with Senator Shelley Moore Capito about all of that and more. Take a listen. Democrats from the beginning have been opposed to President Trump's military action in Iran. They continue to try to pass this war powers resolution. They're trying to peel off Republicans. Where does the Senate stand when it comes to President Trump's actions in Iran?
Well, we just had a vote and earlier today, and the war powers that the Democrats want is not going to succeed. The president has been clear that he is going to bring this to a close. He has been clear also that what putting into effect a war powers resolution would mean very seriously weaken us and weaken our ships and our commercial ships. And so we think it's the wrong direction to go. And, we're in a pause right now in a ceasefire, and I think that begs the question, are we really engaged in any kind of hostilities? And so I think right now, I think that that War Powers Act will be defeated.
The president's been looking at his options. He's been getting lots of plans about future military action. He also said that he was just an hour away from striking Iran when he called it off, saying that, of course, we're capable of attacking them again. Let's listen to what Vice President J.D. Vance said today during a press briefing at the White House.
We think the Iranians want to make a deal, but there's an option B. And the option B is that we could restart the military campaign.
So you mentioned opening Straits of Hormuz. Karg Island is still there, controlled by the Iranians. Is that something you think should be taken over by the United States, even if just temporarily, in order to reach that goal?
I think the president's going to make that decision. I think they are probably studying that every day, as the vice president said. I think the president does see the urgency of wanting to bring this to a close, but he's not willing to sacrifice a bad deal or a non-deal for something that is as important as this. And I support him on that. And so I think we'll see Karg Island will be a point of discussion, and maybe that's where the attack goes. I don't know that, but I think that the president is going to have a strong response here to try to force the Iranians into a deal that is good for everybody.
Based on what you've been briefed on, is there anything specific that you think needs to happen based on what you're hearing? I mean, it seems like we're in this position where the Iranians keep giving us unacceptable proposals. The president has said that they're just stringing us along, and yet here we are still in these negotiations going on and on and on without taking something of value like Karg Island to push them into a better position for us in these.
I think the other option that I see that I think would be useful and very powerful is to have the Gulf state nations join with us. You see that UAE has been attacked and has retaliated according to public reports, and I think that is a powerful tool for us to be able to have the strength to get a good negotiation. You also saw that the president, when he was in China, even though he says he didn't ask for anything, which I believe him, but he did, I'm sure, make it very, very explicit to the Chinese that this is in their best interest to de-escalate here.
Speaking of Iran's behavior in the UAE, there's been a lot of crazy reporting coming out of that country. They just hosted mass weddings for those who are volunteering to sacrifice for their country. There's this video that's coming out of Iranian state TV of them shooting AK-47s at a UAE flag. There's this fear that if the people were to rise up again, they would be slaughtered as they were before, as the president has noted. So how do we negotiate with a regime like this that is doing this on their state television? Can we really ensure that they're operating in good faith, or does more need to be done?
Well, I mean, I think that's their way to project power. And we know they've already killed, approximately 30,000 of their own citizens by quelling any kind of uprising or a want for freedom or internet or whatever. And I think that, so they project power by showing that we will end your life, which to me is very indicative of the kind of, not just the kind of people we're dealing with, the nation and the ethic there. And so I think that my question is, and I haven't had this fully answered, is who's really in charge?
Yeah.
And is this an internal projection of power, or is this an external projection of power? And I think it's probably more internal. It's the revolutionary parts of Iran that are trying to take over and be the superior. And I think they could be more difficult to deal with, but still not as difficult as the IRGC,
right,
which I think would be the ultimate very difficult.
Well, when you're seeing the state TV anchors there acting like that, it becomes even more clear that they cannot have a nuclear weapon, because this is how they would behave if they had one of those, and we cannot have that.
That's not something you're going to be doing.
No, I will not be doing that, no. But getting to politics before we leave here, President Trump just endorsed Ken Paxton in the primary for U.S. Senate in Texas against incumbent John Cornyn, your colleague on Capitol Hill. Do you have any thoughts about what that means for the Senate or John Cornyn's position?
Well, I think John Cornyn is an outstanding member of the U.S. Senate. I have supported him and will continue to. He's a good friend. He's a leader, and he's good for Texas. And I hope that he's successful on primary day. And, can't control what the president does, but I'm in John Cornyn's corner, have been from the beginning.
All right, we'll be watching that primary. Senator, great to see you.
Great to see you,
Thank you so
Katie.
much. Good
Thanks.
to see you. Well, Democrats wasted no time politicizing the tragedy in San Diego, but instead of policing their own violent rhetoric, they're trying to police our Second Amendment rights. Plus, we have a News Nation exclusive in the Alex Murdaugh case. It's all coming up. Katie Pavlich tonight. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Ebola is surging again in Africa with around 130 deaths and 540 cases in the Congo and Uganda. The government has issued a ban on foreign travelers who visited those regions in the last 21 days from entering the United States. This comes after an American doctor working in the infected area tested positive for the disease. Symptoms start off as flu-like before developing into spontaneous internal and external bleeding. And while this is a very serious and deadly disease, the outbreak poses a very low risk to the American public. In fact, the odds of you getting it here in America are practically zero right now. You're far more likely to be struck by lightning or to fall down a manhole, which tragically just happened to one woman in New York City. A 56-year-old grandmother fell to her death after stepping out of her vehicle in Midtown Manhattan straight down an uncovered manhole, which was dislodged by a heavy truck. After plummeting 10 feet, officers found her unconscious and unresponsive. She was rushed to a nearby hospital where she was pronounced dead. The utility company, Con Edison, is actively investigating the incident and why the manhole was left open. There are up to 5,000 manhole accidents in America each year, according to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. So while the odds are still 1 in millions that you'll die down a manhole, it's always worth checking out your surroundings to make sure that you're safe. Our thoughts are with that poor woman and her family. Awful. Well, it took Democrats less than a day to turn the tragic mosque attack in San Diego into a push for gun control, but none of them mentioned that Deep Blue California was one of the states that has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. And Democrats across the country are trying to take similar steps to crack down on guns, like Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger, who recently signed legislation banning the sale and manufacture of sporting rifles and other weapons. Joining us now, Cam Edwards, host of the Bearing Arms Cam and Company podcast and editor of BearingArms.com. Cam, great to see you. Thanks so much. So, first of all, for people who are not familiar with the Virginia law, tell us what has happened with the governor signing it and what it will mean for gun owners and for those selling guns through gun shops.
Sure, and thanks, Kate. It's good to be here tonight. So there are a couple of things, right? So first, she signed a bill that bans so-called assault firearms. These are, AR-style rifles. There are some shotguns that actually she objected to being included in the bill. She actually offered an amendment to the General Assembly that was rejected. So even though she herself says that some of these arms are commonly used for lawful activities like hunting, she is still willing to ban them. In addition, you've got a ban on magazines that can hold more than 15 rounds of ammunition. This ban is on the manufacture, the sale, the transfer of these firearms. It is not a ban on the possession of these firearms if you currently own them. However, there's also a piece of legislation that Governor Spanberger signed that will make it illegal to carry one of these firearms in public as of July the 1st. It's going to be a Class 1 misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in jail. So, I think this is a first step towards banning the possession altogether.
Right.
But this is a ban on the sale of these commonly owned firearms. And then
Would
again,
that mean
if
you can't transport it? Would that mean you can't put it in your car and take it to the range, for example? Does that count as in public? Is that specified?
Well, that's going to be up to, I think, an overzealous prosecutor, right? And that's one of the concerns. So there is a carve out that if you are taking your banned assault firearm to an established gun range, that is technically allowed, right? But I'm not an attorney, but I would suggest if you're doing so,
right,
put it in your trunk, leave it unloaded. Make sure that you are as safe as possible, because I think that there are going to be jurisdictions in the Commonwealth where you do have prosecutors who are looking to make an example out of gun owners for daring to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
So there are a number of lawsuits that were filed almost immediately after the governor signed this legislation. The NRA, the Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America. There may be a couple more who will jump in on this. What is their argument, and do you think that they'll be successful based on other precedent that we've seen at the Supreme Court, for example, when it comes to the Second Amendment?
Yeah, the argument is pretty simple and straightforward, that these are arms that are in common use for lawful purposes, therefore they can be banned under the Heller test that the Supreme Court issued when it struck down D.C.'s handgun ban back in 2008. The problem is that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals has previously upheld Maryland's ban on so-called assault weapons. They say that AR-15s aren't protected by the Second Amendment because they're like machine guns. They're dangerously unusual, even though they are the most popular rifle in the country. So with the Fourth Circuit, having jurisdiction over Virginia in the federal courts, this is going to be, I think, a really tough case to win until this case gets up to the Supreme Court.
Do you think it's past time for the Supreme Court to take on this issue of the modern sporting rifle, which is owned by tens of millions of Americans?
Yeah, long past time. There was a case last year, Snope versus Frosch out of Maryland. The Supreme Court, I think, held that in conference like 15 times before it denied cert. Justice Kavanaugh said he anticipated that the court would take up the issue in the next term or two. Well, as the next term, we're seeing states like Minnesota, Democrats try to pass their own gun ban. Virginia did pass a gun ban. Rhode Island is talking about now banning the possession of these firearms that they banned the sale of last year. And Democrats are just going to keep pushing this as far as they can until the Supreme Court steps in and tells them you can't do this. This is a violation of our Second Amendment rights.
It's just kind of wild how, the Second Amendment of the Constitution only applies in certain states depending on who your legislature and governor is. But we will continue to watch it. Cam Edwards, great to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight.
You too, Katie. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Well, something very big just happened in the world of crypto, and investors could be cashing in. But before you move your money, we're taking a closer look at the risks. Don't go anywhere. Well, there is a potentially huge development for crypto on the horizon. It's called the Clarity Act, and a big chunk of it just cleared the Senate Banking Committee. The bill aims to create a federal framework for the industry that currently doesn't exist, and it's causing problems. It would dictate who regulates the industry and who counts as a security, like a stock investment, versus what is considered a commodity, like gold or oil. The banking industry is not on board, to say the least, fearing the new regulations that could come along with it. But some believe this could create a new financial landscape that banks should embrace instead of fighting against. So could this news lead to a surge in investment in mainstream adoption? Let's ask the experts. Joining me now is Faryar Shirzad, Coinbase Chief Operating Officer, and Sam Lyman, BPI Head of Research and former Senior Advisor and Chief Speechwriter to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Great to see both of you. So Mr. Shirzad, why is this bill good for the crypto industry as a whole? And why is it important that it passes?
Well, it's because it does exactly what you said, Katie. It provides clear rules for innovators and developers in the United States to be able to build blockchain-based and crypto-based applications without uncertainty as to what their regulatory expectations are. We're in a moment where you've got a revolution happening in what are known as stablecoin payments because of the Genius Act that went through Congress last year. And now developers are waiting to build different types of applications where you can use, crypto technology to transfer value in any number of different ways. And this piece of legislation provides clarity and certainty and makes the U.S. The home for building the next generation of the financial system. It's quite exciting.
It's very exciting. Sam, the banking industry has been very contentious about this bill. They've been very contentious about digital currency, Bitcoin in general. Can you talk about why that is? And has there been bipartisan support of this? Are there a few people in Capitol Hill who have made this worse for you? What do you see the future being of this bill?
Yeah, Katie, that's a great question. The banking industry has been opposed to Bitcoin in one way or another, really since its inception. There's three phases that every emerging technology goes through. First, they laugh at you, then they ignore you, then they fight you, and I'll add a fourth phase, then you win. We're currently in the winning stage right now. The banking industry has been opposed to Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a radical technology that allows every American to be their own bank. It allows every American to buy and hold their own money and to be able to send their money to wherever they want without any middleman whatsoever. Typically, that middleman is the banks, and so the banks have been opposed to different regulations within this bill for quite some time. They took particular issue with stablecoins. Stablecoins on different exchanges offer yield to users that are far more competitive than the kind of yield you can get from a savings account. So the banking lobby has been fighting really hard to strip that yield down. And there's been a concession where stablecoin providers and exchanges can provide yield in the form of rewards, but it's less than it used to be, but it's still a big win for the industry.
So, Faryar, I've been watching this issue for years now, and politics, of course, comes into it. But Coinbase was a startup in Silicon Valley as a platform to purchase Bitcoin and other forms of digital currency. Can you talk about the road to where we are now? Because it was a very rough one. I mean, the federal government under the Biden administration tried to run you guys completely out of business. There were potentially criminal charges against you based on no real rules, by them calling Bitcoin a commodity when it wasn't clear that it was a commodity. So talk about in a quick history of where we have been with this issue, specifically with these exchanges, and where we are now with the Clarity Act and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, Sam's right. There was a long period where they were ignoring us, the regulators around the country. But even with that, companies like Coinbase, who were early on the scene, kind of made an effort to try to patch together as many of the existing laws and comply with them to make sure that we ran a compliant exchange and operated by the rules. When the Biden administration came in, they took that lack of clarity and decided to weaponize it. So the SEC started suing one American company after another. And then even more perniciously, the bank regulators started squeezing banks to withhold basic banking services, not only from crypto companies, but even from individuals. Even members of my own team couldn't get home equity loans or what have you. So there was a sort of pervasive whole of government attack on anybody that was associated with Bitcoin or crypto under the Biden administration. President Trump showed up, decided to campaign on crypto to make the U.S. crypto the capital of the world. But his position on crypto is very much like his position on everything else, which is provide clear rules, allow innovators to innovate, not make regulations the blocking factor for America's leadership in an emerging technology. And that's what's allowed companies like ours to be able to invest, grow, hire people, and begin to build the next generation of the financial system to do what Sam said, which is to help people hold and move their own value without having to pay an intermediary extra money. And I think that's been really powerful what's happened already in the last 18 months.
Well, the future, I know, is bright, and it's been so interesting to watch all of this move forward. So thank you both for joining me tonight. Faryar Shirzad and Sam Lyman, great to see you both.
Thank you, Katie.
Well, the death penalty is back on the table in the Alex Murdaugh case, and his legal team is crying lawfare. Take a listen.
What does he know today he didn't know 5 years ago? Alan Wilson plays politics as opposed to playing prosecutor. Please, Alan, focus on your job and not the politics.
And tonight, the South Carolina prosecutor fires back exclusively on News Nation. We'll bring it to you right after this. We are back with a News Nation exclusive. South Carolina's Attorney General is hitting back at Alex Murdaugh's defense team, who accused him of playing politics instead of prosecutor by putting the death penalty back on the table. Here's what he said.
Let's talk about the death penalty.
Yeah.
Dick Harpootlian said, ultimately, this is political for you. Would you like to respond to that?
So, Mr. Harpootlian has been a Democratic activist for the better part of 50 years in South Carolina. He was the former chairman of the state Democratic Party. He is a very hyper-partisan person in his personal life, and he has a vested interest in politics at the state level. He has a vested interest in the governor's race. He has a vested interest in the attorney general's race. He has a vested interest in all races. And so he's going to inject politics into this. The reality of the matter is that when the Supreme Court reversed this case, I went to members of my team, and we said that we're going to have to evaluate this case as if it was never tried. And we have to consider and evaluate all aspects of this case, to include our legal strategy, to include the venue questions that are going to be coming up, to include capital punishment.
News Nation's Rich McHugh is the one who got that exclusive. He joins us with David Ehrenberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County. Great to see you both. So, Rich, your thoughts here about that, what he said to you.
Hi, Katie. Well, I think this is all in response, obviously, to Harpootlian's press conference the day before, which I was at. And Harpootlian made a number of comments. He also said they botched the murder investigation. And so he's essentially laying out, saying we have these tantalizing new things that we're going to reveal. I asked him, what are the things you're going to reveal? He said, oh, we can't get into that. One of the things they did talk about was there was male DNA apparently under Maggie's fingernails that they haven't tested. But I think this is posturing on both sides, right? I think Harpootlian is coming out and saying this, and we're not going to have this trial starting until 2027. And this is Attorney General Alan Wilson saying, look, we are going to do our best to get this trial back on trial as soon as possible. Right. And we did present a fair and impartial trial for them. And so, I think this is the jockeying that you're seeing in this uber intense trial ahead.
So I just want to remind everybody, if they're not familiar, the first trial was thrown out because the clerk in the case was coaching the jury and basically saying this guy was guilty. And now they're trying to introduce new evidence and to get a non-guilty verdict in the second time around. But David, you witnessed all of this the first time. What is your reaction to hearing them trying to basically not just retry the same case they just had, but introduce new evidence, as Rich just explained, and have a completely new set of facts the second time around?
Katie, the defense is trying to bring up the DNA argument that there was some unknown man's DNA under Maggie's fingernails, but it was already discussed in the first trial, so it's not even new. It's touch DNA, and it was severely degraded. It doesn't prove anything. You could touch a doorknob and get someone else's DNA under your fingernails in that way. And remember, in the first trial, they said this was an execution-style killing by some drug cartels or vigilantes seeking revenge for the Paul Murdaugh boat crash. And so this goes against what they were saying back then. This was a murder with a 12-gauge shotgun from a while away, not someone who is going up to Maggie. And also, there are no defensive wounds on Maggie. So the whole DNA thing is a red herring. It's nonsense. Now, I do think the defense has a legitimate argument, though, that if you seek the death penalty now, it does seem like vindictiveness, because there's no new evidence that would make the prosecution seek the death penalty other than just being angry at the appeals court result.
Rich, you also spoke to the Attorney General about the accusations that he botched the first investigation. What was his response to that?
He said absolutely not. They did exemplary work, and he stands behind it. He said SLED, the investigative body here in South Carolina, they did tremendous work, and that was borne out in court. Something I do want to mention, Katie, is that the timing on this is going to come into play. The Attorney General says he wants to get this case on the docket soon. Harpootlian says, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to push that to 2027 because he's not going to be the Attorney General. He's running for governor. And the Attorney General says, well, they're trying to fund a candidate who is possibly going to take over for AG. And if that person becomes the AG, they might just say, hey, we don't want to retry this case. So that's an interesting twist ahead.
Yeah, the politics are also coming into this trial in a way that maybe it wasn't in the first trial. But David, Murdaugh's defense attorney, he confirmed that they're also seeking a venue change for the retrial. And they're saying, because it was such a public spectacle, that it would be hard to find a jury in Colleton County that would be fair. Is that realistic, or are they going to keep it in the same place they had before?
I think they'll keep it in the same place because no matter where you move it in South Carolina, everyone has heard about this case. And that's okay because you don't need a blank vessel, empty slate here. What you need here is just jurors who will follow the evidence and the law. Just put aside what they've heard and what they know and just follow the evidence and the law. You can get a juror in any high-profile case, even in this one.
All right, David Ehrenberg, thank you. Richard McHugh, thank you for your exclusive reporting and for joining me tonight. Great to see you both. Thank you. See you soon. All right, well, people bring some pretty weird companions on airplanes. Emotional support peacocks, of course, we've seen before, but this incident forced an airline to change their company policy. That's next.
If you catch me at the border, I got visas in my name. If you come around here, I'll make them all day. I get one down in a second if you wait. I fly like paper gas.
Well, imagine that being your seatmate on a flight. But Southwest Airlines says no more. They recently updated their company policy to ban any human-like or animal-like robots from both the cabin and check baggage, regardless of size or purpose, because that was one incident of many. Jesse Weber joins me now. Jesse, I love in the video how they talk about how he was so excited for his flight as if it's an actual person. But would you rather sit next to a robot, a peacock, or a monkey on a flight?
It's a great question. I haven't been asked that specific question in quite some time. Probably the robot. I mean, honestly, did you see the moves right there? I don't like robot discrimination, and that's what this is right now. I don't know what the conversation would be like. So, where are you headed today? I don't know what that would be like.
As long as the robot uses headphones with whatever they're listening to or watching, they can sit next to me.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Good standard.
Yeah.
All right, Jesse, have a great show. Good to see
seeing you. Hey everybody, and welcome to Jesse Weber Live. Primary day. Primaries held in 6 states today. Kentucky's Thomas Massie faced the most expensive primary in history against his Trump-backed opponent, and today's election results could be a referendum on if the president's grip on the Republican Party is still holding. We've got tonight's winners, losers, got an all-star politics panel to help us break it all down. Speaking of all-stars, by the way, we're going to be diving into the NBA playoffs tonight. What's going on? The New York Knicks, they are still at this time, overtime, battling the Cleveland Cavaliers in hopes of snapping their 50-year title drought. But here's the thing, even if the Knicks do make it to the finals, are they prepared for whichever monster team makes it out of the West? Here's the good news. We got an expert on this. New York's very own Simone Eli here to discuss. Then, Alec Murdaugh. We got a key figure from the Alec Murdaugh story saying he is now investigating a cold case death that may be linked to the Murdaugh family. The question is, who killed Stephen Smith? We'll have the latest on that in just a bit. But begin tonight with more information about that deadly shooting at the Islamic Center of San Diego that left 3 victims dead after 2 teens allegedly opened fire on the mosque Monday morning. Police say the 2 teen suspects are also dead from apparent self-inflicted gunshot wounds. And though authorities still aren't naming the 17 and 18-year-old suspects, they did name the victims at a press conference earlier today. They're Mansour Kazia, Nader Awad, and Amin Abdullah. That's the security guard who's being called a hero after police say he stopped the shooters from getting into that mosque. San Diego Police Chief Scott Wall said the shooters initially ran past Abdullah because they didn't see him, which, by the way, may have been their fatal mistake, because what did he do? Snapped into action, immediately engaged these intruders, and opened fire. The suspects, they shot back, and despite the fact that he was fighting for his life, Abdullah managed to reach for his radio, and he put out the call for the mosque to begin lockdown protocols. Police say the almost 140 students, think about that, 140 students that were just studying at the mosque school. They were just 15 feet away from the shooters when that call went out. And though Abdullah died tragically in that gunfight, the mosque's leader, Imam Taha Hassan, made it clear that it was his heroism that saved the day.
If it was not for him, as Chief mentioned, the carnage would be much worse. He's the one who stopped them, who slowed them down. If he didn't do what he did, and he sacrificed his life, the two suspects would have easily access to every single classroom.
Can you imagine what that would have looked like? Now, Abdullah wasn't the only hero, because when you think about it, police said that Kazia and Awad, who were killed in the parking lot soon after Abdullah, they also played a critical role in delaying the shooters. I mean, this is grim, but the time it took for the shooters to corner and kill these two men, engage these two men, that was enough time for the police to arrive, and the attackers took off soon after. And the teen shooters, they were found dead soon after in a car parked nearby from, again, apparent self-inflicted gunshot wounds. But the question is, what happened here? What led two teens to reportedly do all this? Well, before the attack, the police were looking for one of the suspects after his mom called 911 to say her son had taken her guns and car and could be suicidal. And since the attack, police say they've executed 3 search warrants on locations that are related to the shooters, and they have recovered over 30 guns. They've also searched their electronic devices, where a manifesto was apparently found. The FBI has been working on the case now alongside the police on the case, and according to Special Agent Mark Remley, the shooters appear to have been met and have been radicalized online. And he also said that there was about what was found in the suspect's car.
In the vehicle they used, we also identified writings and various ideologies outlining religious and racial beliefs of how the world they envisioned should look. These subjects did not discriminate on who they hated.
Now, officials, they refused to narrow down the suspect's specific views or ideology, but whatever their reason or hate, it may be cold comfort to San Diego's Islamic community, which remembered the victims at a vigil tonight. The question is now, what can be done to stop more of these shootings before they happen? And if they do happen, how do people fight back? How do they respond? Joining me now to help answer those questions, I have 2 great guests. I have with me former FBI profiler Andrew Bringle and former SWAT team leader and founder of Proactive Response Group, which trains schools and businesses on active shooter responses, my friend Chad Ayers. Great to have you both here. Chad, I'm going to start with you. You hear about that security guard. Can you walk us through how much of a hero he was? I mean, what it's like to respond to an active shooting situation like this?
Yeah, well, Jesse, thanks for having me. But you said the word just then. He's a hero. And just like the chief said, just like the head of the Islamic Center said, he is a hero. You know, in situations like this, active shooters, in law enforcement, obviously, we are trained to go. We don't wait on backup. We go to the sound of gunfire. And in active shooter events, these suspects, many of them are not anticipating resistance. Right, so we have to disrupt that mindset, and that is what that security guard did. He stepped up that day, yesterday, and put his life on the line. Look, he's a security guard. He is not a sworn law enforcement officer or an agent. Yeah. Right. He didn't swear to the Constitution, but he did. His training kicked in, and lives were saved because of the actions of that security guard that day.
I want to talk a little bit more about what precautions can be taken at mosques and what people can do if they, God forbid, find themselves in that situation. But Andrew, I want to go to you. Radicalized online? How does that happen? Andrew,
it's happened for the last 20 years. We can follow that pattern. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. So you're saying it's been happening for quite
Jesse,
some time. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for having me in my prayer. Quite some time, 20 years plus. And it's only getting worse with network-based nihilistic violent groups like 764, the Manic Murder Cult, No Lives Matter. These network groups target young people, the youth, on gaming platforms and the dark web. And so they recruit both passively and assertively. Once these young people are identified as susceptible, then they groom them. And oftentimes these young people will do self-harm or harm others.
Andrew, I want to be clear about something. How does the FBI monitor these chats? Do they monitor these chats? I don't know how they would even be able to have the bandwidth to monitor everything that's going on. I mean, you don't have to give away the secrets and methods, but I mean, how do they monitor that? Or does it become a question, if our viewers are listening to this right now, it's up to the parents? Is that the first line of defense?
Yeah, it is. In fact, the first line of defense. There are 3 P's of policing. There's prevention, prediction, and prepared response. And so the first piece is prevention. And so it's educating the community and having parents identify those triggering points, those red flags, if you will. And in this case, the parent did. Unfortunately, the offenders weren't found before they committed the violent acts.
Yeah. And Chad, look, this is not the first time that we've seen attacks on houses of worship. How do mosques protect themselves? You know, I know that there's this, they added bulletproof windows recently. I'm sure that helps, but is that all that can be done? What do churches, what do synagogues, what are mosques supposed to do in 2026?
Yeah, you know, Jesse, that's a great question. It's really got to be a holistic approach. It's not just training. It's not just, you know, technology. It's got to be a holistic approach with, you know, key card access, access control, communication, good camera systems, training, valuable, effective training, and running drills on situations like this. Kind of like Andrew just mentioned, listen, we have seen an uptick. This is no longer like when you and I were growing up, you got, you know, a beef with your neighbor, you threw some punches. Unfortunately, these kids spend their days now on these video games, first-person realistic shooter games where they murder all day long. So they're not going out and throwing punches. They're going to get mom and dad's guns, pulling the trigger, and then going, oh, crap, I can't hit the reset button on this one. So, again, layers of protection are great, Jesse, but layers of protection can be beat. Look, we saw that at the White House Correspondents Center, right? We had some of the most prominent people there. Layers of protection can be beat. You have to have a plan in place, and you have to be trained.
Andrew, I want to pick up on something Chad said. Is there a desensitization going on right now? Is it? I mean, we've had this conversation for such a long time about video games and online, you know, platforms, but is it worse now?
That's a great question, and something that we researched when I was at the Behavioral Science Unit. When I was a kid in the 60s, you would watch a nature show like The Wild Kingdom, and they would cut away before the lion actually ate the gazelle. Today, your 8-year-old, your 9-year-old, your 10-year-old on the internet sees the tiger or lion eat the gazelle's entrails out on video. You see the same thing, war footage, you see fighting footage. These kids are desensitized to violence. And that has kind of been projected in our society as a whole because we've lost the civility of a dialogue, which is a conversation without judgment. And now everyone jumps to discussion and debate. And their adversarial approach, I think, is something that erodes the civility in our society.
Makes you think about social media, how many people make comments and say things on there. You know, look, it's a different kind of platform to engage. Look, Chad, I'm going to ask you the most difficult question of all, but this is what you're training about. This is what you're teaching about. If someone should, God forbid, find themselves in a situation like that, what do you advise they do? What do you advise they don't do? How do they even prepare to be engaged in something like this?
Yeah, you know, Jesse, I think it starts with being situationally aware, no matter where you are. You're at your house of worship, you're at the grocery store, you're at a concert, you're at a ball game. You need to be looking around and have a plan in place for you and your family. Obviously, get away if you can. If you can't get away, you need to shut, lock, barricade an area, make it hard for the bad guy to get to you. But you always have to be ready to fight. I'll be honest, I've been outspoken about some of this run, hide, fight training that says fight only as a last resort. No, you fight when your life depends on it, which could be the first course of action you have to take to make sure you go home to see your family. Survival is the main goal. It's time schools across the country stop thinking that a 6-minute quick video at the beginning of the year is preparing their teachers for the unthinkable. Invest into the lives of these teachers because the kids' lives are on the line here.
That's a great point. Andrew, I'm trying to understand a little bit what the FBI is doing to analyze this. You know, just because the suspects are dead doesn't mean the investigation's over. They talk about finding these writings, a manifesto. Law enforcement said the shooters shared a broad hatred, that it was toward different religions and races. How do they analyze this? What are they doing behind the scenes?
Well, the first piece, the first step, will be to analyze the evidence that they collect, both from their social media accounts, from their phones and texts, from the people that they've talked to. They want to make sure that we're only 2 people involved in this violence. That's the first part, an order of business. The second is there's a lot of information that can be learned after action. We were talking about how to prevent this stuff before it happens. And there's groups out there, both public and private, and the partnerships between organizations like the FBI and a group called Eradicate Hate, which was developed after the Tree of Life synagogue massacre in Pittsburgh, are critically important because education and awareness training so that you see those red flags that can be reported. The see something, say something is well before you run, fight, or hide. So those are the critical pieces that partnerships have to be developed and promulgate the training that helps both the community as well as the police prevent these attacks from happening.
So unanswered questions there. And Chad, I want to leave you this 40 seconds left. One of the other unanswered questions, I guess one of the things going to be explored, if they were looking for one of these shooters, law enforcement was looking for one of these shooters given the 911 phone call, what's the challenge there in trying to track somebody before they do something like this?
Well, luckily, without going into a lot of detail, there is a lot of great technology out there for law enforcement. You've got, and this is no secret, we have license plate readers, cameras on intersections, cell phone tracking. So kudos to that mother. Listen,
yeah.
God forbid, and I feel so sorry for her, right? That phone call she had to make, but she took the step as a mother and said, something's not right here. My car's gone. My son is suicidal. These are all early warning signs that the Bureau has actually put out along with the United States Secret Service on the early warning signs. She stepped up and she called law enforcement immediately. That put them ahead of the 8 ball just a little bit, and I think that's what saved lives yesterday.
Listen, that's also different from other cases that we've covered before where you have young shooters where the parents didn't make that phone call. Chad Ayers, Andrew Bringle, thanks so much for coming on. Difficult case, but always appreciate your perspective. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, coming up, primary day in America. Some of the most important votes of the year happened today. From a record-breaking GOP civil war in Kentucky to must-win battlegrounds that could make or break legacies and careers, we're not just finding out who's going to represent the 2 parties in November. We are also learning who will probably be running the country for the foreseeable future. The winners, the losers, our all-star panel. Going to break it down next. One of the most important voting days of the entire year is here. Voters in 6 key battleground states headed to the polls, sending shockwaves through Washington and potentially shaping who holds power in this country for years to come. Voters across Kentucky, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Alabama, Oregon, Idaho, they weighed in on their party's nominees. But today's vote was really about so much more. The economy, the war in Iran, party identity, and this one, the extent of President Donald Trump's political power and influence. It was a sneak peek at whether Americans want more of the same or a political course correction heading into the midterms. So the question is, who won the big races? Let's break it down. Kentucky, this is a big one. All eyes were on a bitter Republican civil war as Trump-backed challenger Ed Galbraith took on Congressman Thomas Massie. Now, Massie was President Trump's chief Republican critic, right? Epstein files, Iran war, big, beautiful bill. Hey, go all the way back to COVID, a lot of issues. And the White House pulled out all the stops to try and defeat him today. And roughly $32 million was spent on just this primary, making it the most expensive House primary in U.S. history. Gotta say, seems to have had an influence. Galbraith has been declared the winner in the race. In the other Kentucky GOP primary for Senate, President Trump's other candidate, Andy Barr, won the nomination for the seat currently held by retiring Mitch McConnell. Georgia, critical battleground state, major Senate and governor primaries that could have huge implications for who controls the U.S. Senate next year. Trump-backed Republican candidate Mike Collins leading the primary to take on Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff in what is shaping up to be the most expensive Senate race in history. The money, I'm definitely going to talk about that. Pennsylvania. Swing district House races could help decide whether Republicans, could hold on to their slim House majority or hand Democrats a path to power. So it's a lot to think about, but fortunately, I'm not doing this alone. Nobody wants to hear me talk to myself. Here's the good news. All-star political panel to break it all down. We got Scotty Nell Hughes, political commentator and strategist, and here on set, Kaivan Shroff, a cultural and media analyst and crisis communications expert. Great to have you both here. Scotty, I'm going to start with you. Kaivan, ladies first. Got to start with Scotty. Scotty, good to see you. So, look, president's candidate's doing very well tonight. Is this a lesson? Don't go against the president?
Let me just say, I'm so glad you have a crisis communicator on set right now, because I think the GOP is going to need one tomorrow morning. I get it. There's a lot of people celebrating in Trump's camp right now. They feel like they had a major win tonight with the Thomas Massie case. But what we did lose in the GOP, and this is the conversation that I really hope we're having in the morning, is we lost the youth vote. That very, very important youth vote that in Kentucky, you had Gallion, who got over 65, those over 65 was the only demographic he won. Over 65 voters. That is not good for the future of the Republican Party. We have worked so hard in 2024, 2020, 2016 to try to recruit those younger voters over to the Republican Party. And I am very fearful that tonight did a lot of damage to not only, they're not necessarily going to turn Democrat, they're just not, they're going to disengage until a new generation of politicians come into order.
We had a reporter on the ground, and the exit responses showed that people voted for him because of the president, that they voted in line because he was going against Massie. So that's an interesting point. Kaivan, I'll go to you. Two aspects to this. It doesn't seem that the president is very lame duck. I mean, he still has tremendous influence over the party, but it also makes me wonder, where do you see this headed towards the general election?
Right, absolutely a show of strength for Trump at a time when the party has been questioning him and fractured on issues like Iran, like economy, like Israel, but he really showed this is still Donald Trump's party. Now, I think the question looking ahead is this a Pyrrhic victory where you win the battle but lose the war? Because, you know, Trump is underwater in polls that don't just have, you know, Republicans voting like we're talking about these primaries. And so if it seems like it's just Trump yes men on the ticket, does that change the way that independents or those swing voters that will decide these outcomes end up turning out or staying home for Republicans? And I think second, right, the question is he was able to tamp down, I think, some of the dissent in his party. So maybe we won't see other electeds come out against him, but now he's unleashed Bill Cassidy. He's unleashed Thomas Massie, who still get to serve out their terms and are already sort of raging against him.
Is there room for a middle ground in this country anymore, or is it just the extremes?
Well, you know, I think there's a lot of room, because I get asked this question a lot, and the data shows again and again, the American voters want room for bipartisanship, for less of the back and forth, less of the vitriol. It's the leadership that tends to crack down on that. And we were talking the other day, right, about redistricting, right? We've made red states redder, blue states bluer, and eliminated that diversity of thought in those places. Of course, that helps those in power.
Scotty, I want to know where the Republican Party is right now. Is there a sense of fracture? I mean, you made a really good point about the youth vote. But, like, for example, the Senate voted to advance the War Powers Resolution, right, to limit or end the Iran war. You had several Republicans, including Bill Cassidy, maybe not a surprise since he lost the primary to a Trump-backed challenger, but voting in favor of this to limit the president in some way. I also saw that was reporting that reporters heard applause coming from the Senate GOP luncheon, that they were applauding Bill Cassidy. Is there a fracture going on? I mean, you talked about having a media crisis manager.
Absolutely, and I think that is why the conversation tomorrow, if they come out here and then continue this victory race where you have some very, I think, interesting communications coming out of the White House press office talking about doing these victory laps that are almost obnoxious. That's not good. If you want to talk about unity, I get it. We have enough that we need to go after the Democrats on, but you've got to work on our own party first. And there are some issues right now that are dividing us. Some might even say you've got the MAGA crowd versus the America First crowd. And that is what is splitting our party. And let me just say, yes, in Kentucky, Trump won. You look down, I put the duly loss down and being more about, you know, probably as possible past football ties that might have maybe lost in the election. But you look over in Pennsylvania, and once again, across the board, we're seeing it time and time again, voting numbers are down. Republicans are definitely suffering a major case of stay-at-home syndrome, and that is not going to be good.
Is that because of is that the primary versus the general election? Maybe just not as many people vote in the primary.
No, I think it's the same thing in 2020. We saw the reason why President Trump lost was because his own base, Republicans, didn't turn out to vote for him. And I really am fearful the Republicans are going to do the same thing in November. And I don't care, like Thomas Massey might have lost today. He's out of his job in January. But guess what? There potentially could be a lot of other Republicans out of their job in January too right now who are high-fiving themselves. They have got to get a hold of the messaging right now. And instead of insulting these younger voters, instead of insulting those that the Trump administration might not agree with right now, figure out a way to communicate and listen to them and bring them into this party and bring it into them fast. Gas prices, war in Iran, inflation. These are some major issues that need to be tackled by this party ASAP.
Kaivan, I had former Mayor Bill de Blasio sitting in this seat yesterday. He was slightly taller. No big deal. But I asked him the question as we're talking about potential fracture. I think in both parties, I think that's a fair argument. Who's going to lead the Democratic Party, right? Who's going to be the person that you see in 2028? He threw out Newsom. I mean, who do you see it right now? If Trump has the hold over the GOP, who is it?
I think they don't have the answer yet, and that's a big problem because they have the advantage of this opportunity to unify, but they're just as fractured on people like a Graham Plattner, right? The Senate could run through that main seat where you have a lot of the traditional Democrats pissed off that that is the nominee. Will they end up backing him? We'll see, but I think the other thing I'm looking at is new media ecosystems on both sides because you live by the sword and you die by the sword. You had Republicans, they had a head start on the internet, right? Massey was crushing it with young voters. Why? Because he goes on shows like Tucker Carlson, because he's on YouTube all the time, right? He does that type of thing, and Democrats have tried to catch up. But what they've done is they've really sort of empowered fringe ideas and let that sort of be a runaway train. Can either party get control of that before it sort of destroys them?
Scotty, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Any of these elections decided by local issues? Like, it seems we're talking so much about ideology. What about the issues that matter?
Well, that's the thing is we're not talking about the issues that matter. That's the big issue, Jesse. You pointed out. But let me tell you how we're going to see where this goes.
Okay.
Let's look at South Carolina. They've got the redistricting issue on the debate right now this week. If they had completely abandoned, if Republicans say, you know what, we're going to keep it as it is and not go with what the White House wants to do, they realize that if they were districted, they are going to disenfranchise Republicans so much that they might even lose more House seats. That's how we will know. That is our reader right there.
Okay. Things to think about. Scotty Nell Hughes, Kaivan Shroff, thank you both so much. Great perspectives. Really appreciate it. Coming up, we're going to switch gears. So with Alec Murdaugh headed toward a retrial, there are a lot of questions about another case in the Low Country that has now come back into the conversation. I'm talking about the death of 19-year-old Stephen Smith, whose body was found in the middle of a rural road. What is that connection to the Murdaugh family? We're going to talk all about it next. Live. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be back after that. Cuomo's up next, everybody. See you then.